Yu Qianshan pulled his hand out of the ball of light. He pulled out a 9-ring pill. A barrier-breaking pill. There was a 9-ring barrier-breaking pill that was extremely precious and could allow a Xiantian expert to advance a minor realm. Regretfully, it was useless to Yu Qianshan, who had reached the 9th heaven stage. The next level for him was sea expansion, and that was not a minor realm increase. However, this pill was still extremely valuable. Even if Yu Qianshan couldn't use it, he could give it to others. Let's take a look at mine. Zhao Wuji also took action. He pulled out a set of mirror armor that looked not bad. Trash. Zhao Wuji cursed. This armor might be useful to others, but it was useless to him. Shui Guanji pulled out a yellow talisman. The talisman released an extremely dense water energy fluctuation. Shui Guanji was delighted, and before the others could examine it carefully, he put it away. Everyone's hearts shook. Perhaps Shui Guanji had truly gained a treasure. Zhong Huiyan also pulled something out, but her luck was rather lacking. She gained a weapon, but it was an extremely specialized weapon. A hook? Few people ever use such a thing. Although it was an enchanted item, it was the lowest possible level. Its value wasn't very high. Enchanted items were used by sea expansion experts. The runes on them could be activated to release massive power. They were categorized into low, middle, and high grade by the material they were made of and the runes carved onto them. A low-grade enchanted item disappointed Zhong Huiyan. Now the only one left was Long Chen. He also reached in and pulled something out. Damn it! Looking at what he had obtained, he couldn't help but curse. He had obtained a pair of boots, and they were actually shabby. They had clearly been worn. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Even the vice sect master and the others couldn't believe their eyes. Long Chen's luck really is heaven-defying, sighed the vice sect master. The vice sect master knew that the netherworld heaven staircase's rewards were divided into different levels. On the 333rd stair, the treasures were split into 3 grades, high, medium, and low. But there was also a 4th possible reward, trash. The probabilities for the 333rd stair were 5% high grade, 30% medium grade, 63% low grade, and 2% trash. Other than the medium-grade treasure Shui Guanji had gotten, the others had all obtained low-grade treasures. But Long Chen had obtained a pair of shabby boots. That was just trash. It truly is heaven-defying. But doesn't it seem like all their luck isn't very good? Sighed someone. Their luck truly was lacking. It was just that when compared to Long Chen, the others' luck could count as not bad. Haha, shabby boots really are a perfect match for a bumpkin, sneered Shui Guanji. Long Chen furiously threw the boots at Shui Guanji's face. Shui Guanji dodged, smiling coldly. He was just about to say something when his expression changed. He hadn't expected Long Chen to have put so much thought into this attack. He had thrown the boots with one in front and one behind, the back one aimed for the spot he would dodge. It almost struck him. Although he just narrowly managed to dodge it, the boot flew right past his nose. He even smelled the disgusting scent from it. Bastard! Shui Guanji was about to attack in fury when the lights beside them disappeared and Zhong Huiyan took the initiative to charge forward. The rest of them were startled and hastily followed. Shui Guanji had no choice but to suppress his fury. This was more important. This would decide who was number one. Not long after the 5 of them had rushed off, Meng Qi and Tang Wan'er arrived. Balls of light appeared beside them. Meng Qi reached in and pulled out a jade tablet. 3 large words were written on it, soul drawing art. This girl's luck truly is good. That soul drawing art is an extremely high-level soul art. It's practically a priceless treasure, praised the vice sect master. Meng Qi was absolutely delighted. Inserting her divine sense into the jade tablet, she found there was an extremely profound magical art recorded inside it. That was precisely what she needed. Within the Shintian Dao sect, there were very few high-level soul arts, and many of them hadn't been suitable for her to train in. This soul drawing art was actually a combined cultivation technique and an offensive magical art. She had an urge to immediately start studying it. Compared to Meng Qi, Tang Wan'er's luck wasn't so good. She obtained a soft armor, but from the shape, it was made for a man. She could only put it away and see if anyone else needed it. Meng Qi and Tang Wan'er continued on. The other celestials also arrived. But most of them didn't obtain anything extraordinary. After them were the Dragon Blood Warriors. They possessed the strongest wills, and they arrived without the slightest hesitation. That had only one thought, and that was to follow Long Chen's footsteps. As for the great genius who had been waving his banner and cheering for everyone, he was now all cheered out. People had to drag him here. "Stop pulling me. Just continue onward. I'll rest here for a bit and catch up to you later," said Guoran weakly. Guoran felt like lead had been poured into his body. Each step was tiring. He was exhausted as if he had just experienced an immense life and death battle. All he wanted to do was to collapse and sleep. "I can't. Boss said that you had to at least reach the 333rd stair, or it would be too embarrassing," said one Dragonblood warrior. He was practically dragging a limp Guoran. This made the monastery head speechless. He truly was history's weakest rank 2 celestial. It was with great difficulty that Guoran allowed himself to be dragged up to the 333rd stair. He wearily stretched his hand into the ball of light beside him. But when he saw the tome he had pulled out, his eyes popped wide open. In fact, his eyes almost popped all the way out. Weapon forging diagram. The seemingly half-dead Guoran instantly revived. Those negative emotions were flung aside by him. This was a secret tome regarding forging arts, and there were detailed explanations about forging. There were both foundational principles as well as designs for high-level weapons. This was what Guoran had always longed for. Although he had obtained the ethereal crafting secret record, a practically divine text that had been written in immortal characters about forging, the principles recorded in it were too advanced. He was only able to comprehend less than 1% of it. Although he had obtained as many secret tomes as possible about forging arts, those things were too rare. Even the 36th supermonastery hadn't possessed very many. Furthermore, those secret tomes were too low-grade. They hadn't been of much assistance to him at all. Now, this weapon forging diagram made up for his deficit. "What are you all doing? How can you act so lazy? You can't even overcome this little hardship?" Guoran seemed like a completely different person. He said, "I was only testing you just now. Did you really think I couldn't continue any longer? I was giving you a display about what not to do. What are you just standing there for? Hurry up. Don't you see boss has already climbed so high that we can't even see him? Look, Gu Yang's so far that his butt is growing smaller and smaller. We've already been thrown into the distance. But brothers, don't worry, charge with me. No obstacles will block us from following boss. We'll let this world see our hot blood and youth." Whether it was the disciples on the netherworld heaven staircase or the expert spectating, they were all speechless. Looking at the revived Guoran, some of them even believed his nonsense. Another disciple collapsed on the ground. Currently, hundreds of disciples had collapsed on the netherworld heaven staircase. They felt too tired. They didn't even have the energy to lift a finger. All they wanted to do was sleep. How regretful. If only they had reached the 333rd stair, they would have obtained even more benefits, sighed a monastery head. This final trial's benefits were hard to imagine. Even if you were just sleeping, the netherworld heaven staircase would allow them to enter a special state that would be extremely helpful to their future advancements. Each extra step would increase the benefits. And the 333rd stair was a dividing line. After passing it, the benefits would be dozens of times greater. It was regretful that despite knowing that, they were unable to help their disciples. This was something related to their will. They had also climbed this staircase before, so they knew just how difficult it was. It was practically impossible to block the silent invasion of your negative emotions. Only the Celestials had it slightly better. That was because they were the favorites of the heavens. They were assisted by the heavenly Daos, which helped to suppress their negative emotions. But the ordinary disciples didn't have that advantage. They had to rely on their own will to defeat their negative emotions. It was truly too difficult. After 6 hours, only half of the 100,000 disciples managed to reach the 333rd stair. The rest had all collapsed, sleeping on the lower steps. Furthermore, after the 333rd step, the pressure would increase. Some people had only taken 1 or 2 steps after obtaining their reward when they were unable to continue any longer. More and more people collapsed. With each passing breath, several disciples lay down. And once they lay down, they wouldn't get up until the trial was over. Boom! The netherworld heaven's staircase trembled. Everyone looked up to see 5 figures had already reached the 666th stair. They really are monsters. A powerless roar rang out in those disciples' hearts. Long Chen and the others were still neck and neck. They arrived on the 666th stair together. Long Chen was breathing a bit heavily now. But he saw that Shui Guanji and the others didn't seem the least bit tired. That surprised him. They truly were worthy of being the 4 heavenly geniuses. This kind of perseverance was admirable. Even he felt that some of his negative emotions were starting to stir, and he had to force them down. What he didn't know was that he was the most shocking one to the vice sect master and the monastery heads. It had to be known that the heavenly Daos would block 10% of the netherworld heaven staircase's power for rank 1 celestials. As for rank 2 celestials, 30% of the power would be blocked. But Long Chen, who wasn't a celestial, was still neck and neck with the rank 2 celestials. That was monstrous. Even those old fellows with so much experience had their jaws drop. The vice sect master was shocked as well, but he put on a calm expression. However, in truth, he was wondering whether he should call the sect master over. Such a fellow might be worth directly sending to the Central Plains. Haha, this thing's not bad, laughed Zhao Wuji as he took out a warhammer from his ball of light. The hammerhead was huge, even larger than a table, and earthen runes shone on it. The powerful pressure coming from it showed that it was a terrifying heavy weapon. A middle-grade enchanted weapon and one with earth element runes. Zhao Wuji really is lucky. Heavy weapons were already rare, and for the runes carved onto it to match Zhao Wuji's element, it was practically tailor-made for him. Ah, the final treasure will be mine. Zhao Wuji was filled with confidence now. Shui Guanji and the others' hearts sank. Zhao Wuji had always been a power-type fighter. Now this heavy weapon would cause his power to increase explosively. Shui Guanji snorted and also reached into his ball of light. But this time, his luck wasn't so good. It was a set of armor and a metallic kind at that. It was not suited to him at all. Furthermore, it was just a low-grade enchanted item. It wasn't useful at all. Shui Guanji was dissatisfied, but he acted as if he didn't care and put it away. Zhong Wuyen's luck was not bad, and she obtained a middle-grade enchanted sword. However, it wasn't useful to her, as she possessed weapons that were more suitable to her. Yu Qianshan received a secret tome about formations. It was useless to him, but it wouldn't be useless to his sect. If you were unable to use something, you could exchange it with the Dao sect for treasures better suited to you. Long Chen reached into his ball of light. This time, he didn't pull it out immediately for fear of embarrassing himself again. He felt it carefully. It appeared long and it didn't feel bad. When he pulled out that long thing, he couldn't help being stunned. It was actually a belt. The belt was new, and it had been made of black silk. It was extremely high-end and grand, and then there was nothing else to say about it. The odds for the 666th stair were as follows. 1% high grade, 60% middle grade, 38% low grade, and 1% trash. To have pulled out trash twice, his luck was truly heaven-defying. Long Chen didn't particularly care. He directly wrapped the belt around his waist. In truth, this belt truly did match his disciple robes and made him appear more handsome. Trash, sneered Shui Guanji. It was unknown whether he was talking about Long Chen or the belt. Yes, but I have no choice. If I wasn't forced, I definitely wouldn't accompany trash like you, said Long Chen helplessly. The light balls disappeared and they had no more time to fight with words. They once more began rushing onward. But now, their speed had clearly dropped. Long Chen felt like he was wading through mud. The resistance was extremely high, and it was exhausting. Moreover, he didn't know whether it was actually exhausting or just a misperception. He had to constantly circulate his own strength to keep in equilibrium with the exhaustion. doing that required constant adjustment. He couldn't allow himself to get nervous or panicked, let alone be invaded by his negative emotions. The true trial only started now. While Long Chen was pushing forward, the vice sect master was lost in thought. It should be essentially impossible for a genius to pull out trash twice. It had never happened before, and it shouldn't be a coincidence. But if it wasn't a coincidence, Long Chen and the others were still pushing on, but after less than 100 stairs, they had become covered in sweat and began gasping for breath. The exhaustion had already begun to silently invade their minds and bodies. But their wills were strong and they ignored it. They continued rushing forward, refusing to fall behind the others. From the start, they had matched their strength. Not one of them was willing to fall behind. That would not only prove they weren't as good as them, but it would also cause them to lose out on their chance to fight for the final reward. Furthermore, if they did fall behind, that would shake their confidence. Perhaps it wouldn't cause problems elsewhere, but on the netherworld heaven staircase, even the slightest disturbance would allow their negative emotions to overcome them. Once those negative emotions appeared, it was very difficult to completely erase them. So now they could only persevere. In truth, the best option would have been to slow down for a while. After adjusting themselves, they could continue forward. But if one person slowed down and the others didn't, they would just be thrown behind. Despite knowing it would be best to change the rhythm, they couldn't. Others would all assume that whoever slowed down had weaker endurance and was weaker. As geniuses, none of them were willing to admit they were weaker. So if you ride a tiger, it's hard to get off. Long Chen also wanted to know just how tough a rank 2 celestial was. He didn't believe he couldn't surpass them. He was different from them. Starting from Phoenix Cry, he had relied on his strength to kill his way out. He refused to believe he couldn't defeat some spoiled brats. Despite being weary to the bone, Long Chen clenched his teeth and pressed on. What he didn't know was that rank 2 celestials were basically natural-born cheaters. He was at a huge disadvantage. If he were also a rank 2 celestial, he would have long since traveled so far that they wouldn't even be able to see him. The 5 of them were stuck advancing as fast as they could, despite being exhausted. Furthermore, they had to act so calm and easygoing in order to cast a shadow on the others' hearts, in hopes that they would give up earlier. If one person slowed down, then they would be the loser. But then the others would also have a good reason to slow down together. By the time they had reached the 700th stair, Tang Wan'er and Meng Qi, who had been over 200 stairs behind them previously, had already reached the 666th stair. That was because Long Chen and the others had slowed down a great deal. Brilliant feather dress. Tang Wan'er obtained a dress made entirely of feathers. The feathers were overflowing with colorful lights. When that dress appeared in her hand, the vice sect master couldn't help being shocked. That was a high-grade enchanted item. It was composed of the feathers from 99 different powerful magical beasts and refined through a formation. Wearing that dress would greatly increase her defense. In fact, it would be able to block the full-strength attack of a late sea expansion expert. It was an absolutely amazing treasure, and the feathers also contained the magical beast's bloodline power. By infusing it with spiritual strength, it was possible to activate the bloodline power and increase the user's defensive strength to a whole new level. Sister, this is a defensive enchanted item. It's just what you need, said Tang Wan'er. As a soul cultivator, I don't face my opponents head-on. You need this more. Keep it. Meng Qi shook her head. She could see that this feathered dress's defensive strength was terrifying, so she wanted Tang Wan'er to keep it. Sister, since I said I'm giving it to you, take it. If you don't, I'll just throw it away. Meng Qi was extremely moved. She knew Tang Wan'er's temperament was extremely direct, and she didn't like beating around the bush. If she refused, then Tang Wan'er really would just toss it away. She could only take the dress. Sending her spiritual strength into it, the dress suddenly brightened and directly appeared on her. The multicolored feathers lit up her face, making her appear too beautiful to even touch. Sister, you really are beautiful. It's too bad that that scoundrel knows how to run ahead while sticking his butt out. Tang Wan'er looked at Long Chen's figure. Long Chen was exhausted but still pushing on, so of course he didn't have time to look back at how beautiful she was. Thank you. Mengqi smiled. Circulating her spiritual strength, the dress disappeared and a small feather appeared in her hair, looking just like an ordinary hairpiece. This was another form of the brilliant feather dress, and an advantage of this soul item. If Mengqi was attacked, it would automatically activate to protect her. If there was no danger, it would stay in this feather form. It would use Mengqi's soul energy to nourish itself. Check your luck too, said Tangwan. Mengqi reached in and pulled out a white pearl. The pearl released powerful spiritual fluctuations. Soul-fixing pearl? How could her luck be this good? Cried a monastery head. This was a high-grade treasure as well. Technically, the chance of obtaining a high-grade treasure was the same as obtaining trash. Long Chen had obtained trash twice. His luck was heaven-defying. As for Mengqi, she had obtained a high-grade treasure twice. Her luck was also heaven-defying. It was truly a stark contrast. As for Tangwana, her luck had been average last time, but this time, she had obtained a high-grade treasure which was an extremely rare soul item. How could there be such a difference? Looking at that figure that was rushing higher, everyone had a bewildered expression. Was this simply the difference between people? That soul-fixing pearl was an enchanted item used to assist cultivation. It was a treasure that would make soul cultivators go crazy. It was an extremely rare treasure that could increase a person's soul energy. But it was a one-use item. Once the energy inside it was used up, it would shatter. However, the soul energy inside it was enough to turn someone with an incredibly weak soul into an expert. Sister, you should take this, said Mengqi. Tangwaner shook her head. My spiritual strength might not be as strong as yours, but it's still very strong. It would be better to leave it for Guyang. His spiritual strength is too weak, and just a defensive soul item isn't a guarantee of protection. Mengqi nodded. Although Tang Wan'er's spiritual strength wasn't as great as hers, it was still far and above average. This soul-fixing pearl would only increase her soul energy by a maximum of 10%. But if it was given to Guyang, then his soul would become above average amongst these elite disciples. Although he wouldn't be able to fight others with his soul since he had no experience or talent in that regard, at least he wouldn't be instantly killed by soul experts. Mengqi looked behind her at Guyang and the others. They were already covered in sweat. Guyang, work hard. I'll leave this reward with you. Mengqi tossed the soul-fixing pearl directly to him. Guyang gratefully caught it. He had heard all their previous words. Don't worry, sister-in-laws, I will definitely meet your expectations. The laughing Mengqi and Tang Wan'er immediately turned red. How could this fellow say such coarse words? They hastily continued on their way. Guoran, hold on. You'll be able to get a reward soon. Guoran was doing his absolute best to persevere, but he had reached his limit. His burst of energy had been completely used up. It took 4 Dragonblood warriors to drag him along. Guyang and the others also reached the 666 stair and received their rewards. Some of those rewards were high grade, some were low grade. They couldn't compare to Mengqi and Tang Wan'er, but they were still extremely excited. After obtaining their rewards, they felt even more drive to climb higher. The rewards this time were a whole level higher than last time. A high-grade reward at this level was better than a high-grade reward at the lower level. Then the next reward had to be beyond their imaginations. Other than Long Chen's group of 5, there was no longer any sense of order on the netherworld heaven staircase. The disciples were scattered all around. Over 20 celestials were led by Guyang, then Yu Zifeng, and then Li Qi and Song Mingyuan. When it came to perseverance, they were on a much higher level considering they had undergone the pain of their bones shattering 9 times. They were over 50 stairs ahead of the other celestials. Behind the celestials were the Dragonblood warriors and Guoran. They also began to collect their rewards. Guoran, wake up. Take out your treasure. One of them slapped Guoran in the face a few times and shouted in his ear. Guoran barely had the energy to reach out with his arm. Regretfully, he didn't have Mengqi or Tang Wan'er's luck this time. He pulled out a sword, one that was merely a low-grade enchanted item. That was useless to him, as he would be able to forge it himself, and its power might even be greater. He collapsed on the ground, and no matter what, he wouldn't get up. He began to snore just like that. What should we do? Just leave him here. Pull him to the side so no one steps on him. Boss only said that he had to get to the 333rd stair. This is already beyond expectations. One of the squad leaders pulled him to a corner and then continued forward. 360 Dragonblood warriors had all reached the 666th stair. Quite a few of them had obtained weapons that they wanted, or even cultivation techniques and secret tomes. There were also medicinal pills and protective items, etc. They were incomparably excited. Seeing them so excited, the monastery heads couldn't help sighing. The Dragonblood warriors really were easily satisfied. That was a good thing, as it raised their morale and expelled their negative emotions. But as for the previous Celestials, the items they had pulled out had been quite a bit better than theirs, but many of them had shaken their heads and sighed, feeling like their luck was bad. Without even knowing it, that increased the pressure on them. The Dragonblood warriors continued forward. Behind them, there were less than 10,000 disciples still fighting to go forward. The others had collapsed. Unable to see hope, they were invaded by their negative emotions. It was truly too difficult to endure. That was especially true since many of these elite disciples didn't even know their own reason for cultivating. Their parents had simply told them that they had to properly cultivate, that they had to excel, to bring honor to their ancestors, to conduct themselves properly. And so, they had begun cultivating. But many of them didn't even know why they had to excel and why they had to bring honor to their ancestors. They had simply been forced to walk forward on this path. Now, these geniuses had become weaklings. The better their family circumstances, the greater their origins and status, the easier they collapsed. It was those who came from comparatively poorer origins who had stronger wills. This situation occurred every time the Netherworld Heaven Staircase was activated, so it was no longer a novel sight. The Xiantian Dao sect's only responsibility was to give them a cultivation environment. They didn't have the manpower or resources to properly educate each disciple in how to properly live their lives. Furthermore, their teachings would be the same: cultivate, excel amongst your peers, bring honor to your ancestors, and conduct yourself properly. Close to half of the disciples hadn't reached the 333rd stair. As for those that had passed, 90% of them didn't reach the 666th stair. And in the end, of the 5,000 people that reached the 666th stair, a fifth of them directly collapsed after taking out their reward. One reason was perhaps because the treasure they had obtained hadn't given them any motivation to continue, and so they had lost that drive. Despite knowing each extra stair they climbed meant greater benefits, they were just too exhausted. The other more important reason was that even Guoran, a rank 2 celestial, had collapsed there, while they were only ordinary disciples. They had already done their best, so there was no need for them to try anymore. Therefore, following the collapse of Guoran, another 1,000 people fell. Following good examples was hard, but following bad examples was easy. The collapse of that many disciples caused even more negative emotions to surge out of the others. People collapsed left and right. Furthermore, the Dragonblood warriors were getting further and further away. They felt that they were so far that they couldn't possibly catch up. They no longer had the confidence to catch up to them. As a result of these factors, a chain reaction started. In the end, the disciple who walked the furthest only managed to take 16 steps before giving up. Now, the only ones still climbing were the Dragonblood Legion and the Celestials. 10,000 people had been turned into less than 400. The more talented they are, the more lacking their character is, said the Vice Sect Master expressionlessly. Other than Shui Wuhan, all the monastery heads' expressions became a bit unnatural. They had already claimed that this was their strongest generation of disciples in all of their history. They had all been extremely confident in them, and they had said that they would definitely surpass the previous generation's records for the trials, including the Netherworld Heaven Staircase. And they weren't necessarily wrong. They truly had surpassed the previous record in two ways. First, the number of people attending was double the previous trials. That was a number worthy of pride. As for the other way, they had surpassed the record. In the last trial, there had been 5,000 disciples who had reached the 666th stair. That was essentially the same as this time. However, last time, over 2,000 disciples had also reached the 700th stair. But this time, only 400 did. That disproportionate dropout rate was also a record. That made the monastery heads blush with shame. The vice sect master was clearly dissatisfied with their teachings. All they had raised was a bunch of greenhouse flowers. But at least the disciples who reached the 700th stair are all extremely powerful. That's something gratifying, said one monastery head in hopes of lifting the awkward atmosphere. Yes, they really are powerful. But does their strength have the slightest thing to do with how you raised them? Asked the vice sect master. That monastery head really was stupid. If the vice sect master had criticisms, he should have just listened and let it be. Instead, he disgraced himself even more. The Dragonblood warriors were the 36th supermonastery's disciples. They had nothing to do with him, but he had tried to act like he had contributed. Shui Wuhan couldn't help sighing upon seeing how those children were still persevering despite the pain. Just how much had they suffered to gain this power? They've reached the 900th stair. The netherworld heaven staircase once more trembled. Long Chen's group had already reached the 900th stair, and everyone's gazes focused on them. That's too fast. One of the monastery heads let out a startled cry. In previous generations, it had taken a full day for any disciple to reach the 900th stair. But now, less than half a day had passed. These monastery heads had also once experienced the netherworld heaven staircase, so they knew how terrifying it was. The higher you went, the greater the difficulty was. The strongest amongst them had only climbed to the 780th stair. Looking at those figures, even the vice sect master was moved. Those 5 figures were all terrifying. Of course, the most terrifying one was Long Chen. Long Chen's robes were already soaked in sweat, and he was panting heavily. He was the one under the most pressure. But in order to give the Dragonblood warriors morale, he could only clench his teeth and continue forward. He refused to fall behind by even a single step. The others weren't much better off than him. They were all panting and covered in sweat. They couldn't conceal their exhaustion. The pressure made it feel like mountains were crushing them. That was no illusion, but true pressure. This cruel trial was a test of both the mind and body. You're already tired? Then I'll tire you bastards to death. Long Chen was also weary to the bone, but seeing how tired the others were, he felt incomparably comfortable inside. Just like that, he took an extra step forward. Shui Guanji and the others' expressions changed. Previously, they had all been in a silent agreement to take a slight pause at the 900th stair. This would allow them to adjust to this pressure and take a slight break, so they could climb higher. But Long Chen had taken the initiative to advance. They had no choice but to clench their teeth and continue. They had an urge to have a fight with him right now, but that would just benefit others. Damn it, tired is good. It's not like I'm the only one getting tired. To have 4 people accompany me, it's worth it. This was just Long Chen's way of comforting himself. He felt a kind of sadistic pleasure, and his mood became better with each step. Seeing them continue climbing without even taking a breath, everyone was startled. The vice sect master's expression was a bit odd. With his vision, he could instantly tell what they were thinking. The youngsters these days really were interesting. But this kind of rush wasn't a good thing. Unless they could manage to climb to the top in one go, they would be forced to stop eventually. And if they were forced to stop instead of choosing to stop, then they would be invaded by their negative emotions, and they wouldn't be able to advance a single step. Behind them, Meng Qi and Tang Wan'er were pale and sweaty. But their eyes were still hard and determined. They would chase after Long Chen. They would get stronger. They didn't want to become a burden to him. Their greatest desire was to one day be able to protect him the way he had protected them. Only they knew just how tired Long Chen was. He never said how much he suffered, as saying it didn't have any use. He had no backer to rely on and could only rely on himself. Normally, Long Chen would act like a scoundrel without a proper thought, But only the people closest to him knew how much he had had to endure. He also needed help, and he also needed protection. Meng Qi and Tang Wan'er held hands as they climbed. Although they weren't as fast as Long Chen, their steps were extremely steady. This was the optimal way of climbing. They had already reached the 853rd stair. Behind them were Gu Yang and the other celestials. I can't go any further. I have to rest here. When they reached the 830th stair, a celestial from the 17th super monastery finally couldn't hold on and sat down. Get up. How can you let yourself be the first one to collapse? Shouted a celestial. These celestials had actually long since felt that they had reached their limit. But their dignity refused to allow them to be the first celestial to give up, so they had pushed themselves to continue. But now, one person was finally done. That was a fatal blow to the others. The collapse of one person greatly affected their mental states. That was especially true since they were all completely exhausted. Seeing that person now peacefully sleeping, they couldn't resist the temptation. Fuck it. I'm tired too. The celestial who had just shouted at him to get up sat down. He instantly became completely relaxed and fell into a deep slumber. You guys can continue. I feel like I've also reached my limit. Another celestial lay down. A relaxed and peaceful smile appeared on his face. That smile seemed incredibly happy. The distant monastery heads couldn't help sighing. Now there'll be trouble. Perhaps they'll all collapse here. They had a deep understanding of the netherworld heaven staircase. The feeling of exhaustion was practically a poison that could instantly infect a person's will. Physically, they're far from reaching their limit. It's just that their will isn't strong enough. How regretful. However, to only collapse at the 830th stair, this record really is not bad. In previous generations, the average for celestials was the 800th stair. Reaching the 810th stair was a limit. The fact they had endured until the 830th stair was because they had profited from Gu Yang and the others. Their pride had refused to allow them to lose to their juniors, who had only just awakened as celestials. That was the only reason they had endured this long. But a person had their limits and they had already surpassed theirs, which was a good thing. Gu Yang and the others ignored them. They continued pushing forward. Their only thought was to follow Long Chen. Whether it was Gu Yang or the Dragon Blood warriors, they didn't treat the netherworld heaven staircase as a trial. They treated it as a battle they had to win, because this trial would decide whether or not they could follow in Long Chen's footsteps, whether or not they could one day stand at the peak of the martial path. If they wanted to fight alongside Long Chen, then they couldn't allow themselves to be thrown too far behind. Otherwise, there would come a day when they would never be able to see his back again. It could be said that Long Chen was their conviction. It was Long Chen who had brought them to heights that they had never imagined, letting them see a greater world. Long Chen had given them everything. But they had to work hard to keep up with him, because if they were unable to follow him one day, that would be worse than death to them. They refused to allow such a thing to happen. The collapse of those people didn't affect Gu Yang and the others because their only goal was Long Chen. Only Long Chen would be able to influence them. Although each step they took was difficult and their bodies trembled, they were filled with resolve. They had no intention of giving up. Heavens, even they've reached the 800th stair? How is that possible? When the first Dragon Blood warrior reached the 800th stair, everyone was shaken. In all of history, only celestials had reached that height. That wasn't because celestials had greater wills, but that the heavenly Daos would reduce the pressure they were under. But these Dragon Blood warriors didn't have that advantage. The most shocking thing was that even after reaching that high, each of the Dragon Blood warriors' expressions were still so determined. Despite their bodies being unsteady, they didn't make a sound. Despite being soaked in sweat, they simply clenched their teeth. They all continued onwards. What terrifying determination, sighed a monastery head. Long Chen isn't the only heaven-defying monster. Even the people by his side are all monsters. The 830th stair. One of the squad leaders had reached the 830th stair. Looking at the snoring celestials on that step, his body trembled. He's already reached his limit. Despite that, all of the monastery heads felt admiration. What? Blood suddenly splashed on the netherworld heaven staircase. That squad leader had taken out a dagger and stabbed himself in the shoulder. The intense pain caused him to frown slightly, but it also caused his exhaustion to lessen as well. He became slightly more energized, allowing him to continue forward. How ruthless! Even the monastery heads' hearts pounded. That squad leader had stabbed the dagger in the space between his bones. That was the most painful spot where the nerves were concentrated. Only people specialized in torture would be able to so precisely aim for that spot. It was the best way to torment your opponents. That was enough pain to make them beg for death. But he had merely frowned before continuing. These old fellows were incomparably shocked. Behind him, the other Dragonblood warriors had also reached their limits. They followed his lead, taking out daggers and stabbing themselves in the most painful spots possible without hesitation. That scene was chilling to the bone. I finally understand why they're so strong. It's no coincidence, it was inevitable, praised one monastery head. The Dragonblood warriors' display showed them just how terrifying willpower could be. It wasn't just talent that decided a person's future. At the top of the Dragonblood Legion was Long Chen, and at the bottom were the Dragonblood warriors. Each one of them was unyielding and courageous, with a will of steel. Suddenly, an angry roar rang out from ahead. Everyone hastily looked up. Previously, their attention had been focused on the Dragonblood warriors, so when they now looked at where Long Chen and the others were, they all jumped in shock. The final 3 stairs. They had currently reached the 996th stair. The 5 of them were trembling, and that furious roar had come from Zhao Wuji. They had obviously reached their limits. The monastery heads could no longer remain sitting. They stood, watching with rapt attention. These final 3 steps were the most crucial. At this point, the 5 of them could no longer advance. They all stopped as they had no choice but to adjust themselves first. Here, their bodies, minds, souls, hearts, and wills were all enduring a harsh trial. This was the most ruthless moment. After their fierce climb here, they had reached a limit. They had to take a breather, but at the same time, they had to endure the powerful pressure here and resist the encroachment of their negative emotions. Long Chen took 3 deep breaths before directly stepping towards the 997th stair. Shui Guanji and the others' expressions became ugly. This bastard! They were infuriated. It was like Long Chen was intentionally opposing them. He refused to give them a moment's rest. If they allowed Long Chen to climb to the top before them, wouldn't it signify that he was the strongest of them all? Although they were furious, they also followed. However, the powerful pressure that descended upon them at the 997th stair caused their expressions to change. Cry of the heavenly Daos. Shui Guanji, Zhao Wuji, Yu Qianshan, and Zhong Weyan activated their heavenly Dao manifestations at the same time. The pressure immediately lightened for them. As for Long Chen, he vomited a mouthful of blood, his expression exceedingly ugly and furious. I refuse to believe I can't get up. Long Chen was ruthless, and he forced his way up. Just like that, he forced his way onto the 997th stair. But by the time he reached there, Shui Guanji and the others had already begun charging toward the 998th stair. They were relying on their cries of the heavenly Daos for a spurt of energy, hoping to directly reach the end like this. But when they reached the 998th stair, they were forced back by a terrifying force. Shui Guanji and the others were completely startled. They hadn't expected the 998th stair's difficulty to be several times that of the 997th stair. They didn't manage to get up. Instead, the rebound force caused them to almost cough up blood. Water waves break the heavens. Shui Guanji suddenly was surrounded by water runes. They formed a channel in front of him that he directly charged through. Boom! The entire netherworld heaven staircase shook. Shui Guanji was the first to step onto the 998th stair. However, people saw that the heavenly Dao runes around him were constantly revolving and changing shape, as if they were currently being compressed by some invisible force. Good, Shui Guanji has done well. He's the first to reach the 998th stair and has taken the lead, laughed Shui Yun-song. Suddenly, sword light pierced forward. An ear-piercing sound rang out as Yu Qianshan took action. His aura completely erupted like a sword coming out of its sheath. He also stepped onto the 998th stair. At the same time, Zhong Win and Zhao Wuji took action as well. Zhao Wuji was covered in a layer of dirt yellow light. It was like a set of armor, and with a single punch, it was like space had exploded. He relied on that to get up. As for Zhong Win, a blood mark appeared on her forehead, forming a rune. However, only the more erudite people knew that it was no rune, but an immortal character, Zhong. This was Zhong Win's ancestral mark. There were many kinds of ancestral marks, and any Xiantian expert's descendants would inherit some bloodline power. However, Zhong Win's ancestor had been a terrifying king. The power of her ancestral mark was on a completely different level than Gu Yang's. The instant the ancestral mark appeared, the void trembled. It was like some mysterious energy was coming from her forehead, one that suppressed the spatial fluctuations. She also reached the 998th stair. Now, the only one left was Long Chen. He was panting for breath on the 997th stair. This scene caused people's expressions to become a bit odd. Oof, a bumpkin really is a bumpkin. Now you should understand the difference, sneered Shui Guanji from above. The others looked at Long Chen. They didn't say anything, but the contempt in their eyes was clear. Wait, something's wrong. When Long Chen fought Shui Guanji, that huge rainbow ring was so powerful. Why isn't he using it? Wondered some people. This was a perplexing question. What was Long Chen thinking? He had clearly reached his limit, but he was still holding back his trump card. Even you people can be called heavenly geniuses? This netherworld heaven staircase is clearly a test for the will, physical body, and soul. But what you are doing is basically cheating, and yet you can still sneer at others disdainfully. I really have to admire you. How did you manage to cultivate your face to such a thickness? Today, I'll display what it means to be a true man and what attitude a true cultivator should possess. Without any technique, I will rely just on myself to reach the 999th stair. I'll let you idiots open your eyes to the world, sneered Long Chen. His voice contained a trace of anger. In truth, he was extremely angry. What he had just said were simply words of rage. In truth, when they had summoned their cries of the heavenly Daos, Long Chen wouldn't be so stupid as to still hold back. He had also begun to summon his divine ring. But he had only just started and had yet to truly bring it out when the pressure on him suddenly increased by dozens of times. He had almost been crushed to death before he hastily stopped. Even so, he had still vomited blood. Only now did Long Chen realize his divine ring was different from their heavenly Dao manifestations. His divine ring was something that helped him absorb energy from the surroundings. As a result, the surrounding energy had been drawn toward him. Energy that contained a powerful pressure had almost crushed him flat. Long Chen now knew that he would probably be extremely miserable today. Now that Shui Guanji sneered at him, he had found a chance to counterattack, cursing them in such a melodramatic way without giving them any way to retort. You? Fine, then let me see how you manage with no outside force. Raged Shui Guanji. It had to be known that they had to use their full strength with the cry of the heavenly Daos in order to reach the 998th stair. They refused to believe he could climb his way without any outside force. That would just be an idiot's dream. He was definitely just posturing. They couldn't be bothered to say anything more to Long Chen, and they began to approach the 999th stair. As they got closer, their expressions changed. They sensed endless pressure from the 999th stair, and that pressure contained a dense aura of death. They sensed a mortal danger from that pressure. In other words, climbing to the 999th stair might kill them. They had never dreamed that the 999th stair would actually pose a danger to their lives. If they messed up, they would lose their lives here. It's definitely fake. How could they allow us to die here? I refuse to believe it. Zhao Wuji snorted and charged toward the 999th stair. When he stepped onto the 999th stair, A translucent flying sword shot toward Zhao Wuji. He hastily blocked, but that flying sword tore through his defense and left a foot-long wound on his chest. They were horrified. When it came to physical defense, Zhao Wuji was the strongest. The runes revolving around him were even stronger than his spiritual qi armor. But he had been injured after just one attack. Then they who did not specialize in defense would be slashed in two, right? Let me try it. Shui Guanji extended a hand. A water arrow shot toward the 999th stair, but he wrapped himself with endless runes first. Another flying sword shot out, smashing apart the water arrow and piercing through Shui Guanji's water runes. Shui Guanji was appalled. He hadn't expected that his water runes would be pierced as easily as water in front of that flying sword. It hadn't been able to resist at all. Sky Water Shield. He hastily formed 3 water shields in front of him. But that sword continued to pierce through them. Just as the sword was about to pierce his heart, it lost its energy and disappeared. Shui Guanji's face was pale. The 4 of us should go from 4 different directions to see if we can scatter its power, suggested Zhong Wuyan. The others nodded and spread out. But when they attempted it again, the 4 of them all received counterattacks, and the power hadn't weakened at all. We have to take a risk. Don't hold back. Charge with your full strength, or it will be impossible, said Zhong Wuyan. The others hesitated but nodded. The 999th stair was too difficult, and there was no room for technique. They could only go all out. From their previous tests, they had found this barrier to be incomparably powerful. Without going all out, they wouldn't be able to pass it. Attack! The 4 of them began to shine with runic light. Activating their strongest defense, they charged to the 999th stair. Boom! The staircase trembled, and suddenly, thousands of flying swords shot out mercilessly at them. Blood splashed. Countless swords pierced through their bodies, and they were sent flying back. All the Xiantian Dao sect's experts' expressions changed. How could this be? The 4 of them were miserably blown back to the 998th stair. They were wildly vomiting blood and filled with horror. They hastily circulated their heavenly Dao runes to heal. Just now, they had been the slightest bit away from being completely crushed. In that instant, they had smelled the scent of death. It was like the Grim Reaper's sickle had brushed right up against their throats. The Xiantian Dao sect's experts were all shocked. They had never expected this situation. This was the Eastern Wasteland's Xiantian branch sect's strongest batch of geniuses in all of history. But they were all stopped in front of the 999th stair. Although the experts were still far away, they had sensed just how terrifying that killing mechanism was. Even they felt a chill. Is it trying to force them into despair? Why does the trial refuse to allow them to pass even though they've reached that point? Complained one monastery head. What is going on? Has something happened with the 999th stair? In previous generations, weren't there disciples who managed to reach the 999th stair? Why can't I remember anything from then? Questioned one of the older experts. That's because the memories regarding the final stair have all been erased. All of you are the same. Once this trial is over, the memories about the final part will disappear, said the vice sect master. Their heart shook. It was no wonder they clearly remembered that there had been disciples to reach the 999th stair, but when they tried to recall that scene, they weren't able to recall it in the slightest. Whether it was the Xiantian Sea, the 9 Netherworld Path, or the Netherworld Heaven Staircase, they were all activated by the head sect. Even they didn't have the qualifications to interfere. If they tried, the laws here would immediately kill them. Even the vice sect master wasn't an exception. But this abnormal difficulty isn't even a trial, it's just murder, cried a monastery head. A single flying sword had the power to kill a celestial. Just now, tens of thousands of them had shot out at the same time, almost killing the 4 of them. It was lucky they had brought out their strongest defense beforehand, or they would have already died. This is a trial. It shouldn't kill our elite disciples. There should be some unknown method to pass. The vice sect master frowned. Although that was what he said, even he wasn't sure. Furthermore, The netherworld heaven staircase had its own laws. There was no way for them to transmit their voices to the disciples on it. Boom. The netherworld heaven staircase shook everyone. Everyone jumped, thinking the four heavenly geniuses had attempted to attack the 999th stair again. However, they found out that the four of them hadn't moved. They were still healing. This rumbling was from a certain figure stepping onto the 998th stair. It's Long Chen. Heavens, he really is not using any technique. He's crazy. There were no fluctuations coming from Long Chen's body. He was clearly using just the power of his physical body. It had to be known that the four heavenly geniuses had had to use their full strength to just barely reach the 998th stair. Is he stupid? Is this worth it? He'll be directly crushed to death by the pressure. What is his reason? Does he really need to care so much about his face? None of them knew that it wasn't the case of him caring so much about his face, but that he really had no other option. The divine ring would only bring him down. As for the 3-star battle armor, it was connected to the divine ring. The principle was the same, and once he activated it, although his power would multiply, the pressure would also be absorbed. It wasn't worth it. His previous words were just to give himself an excuse, to make others think he was posing. It was to conceal the bitter truth. He was already doing his absolute best. One foot was just barely on the edge of the 998th stair, but the surrounding pressure crashed down upon him. He was like a small boat trying to stay afloat on wild waves. He might capsize at any moment. Meng Qi and Tang Wan'er had already stopped at the 900th stair. They had reached their limit. Although their wills were strong enough, their physical bodies were unable to continue. They watched Long Chen attentively. Gu Yang and the others were right behind them. They had also reached the 900th stair. Boss really is boss. He's too strong. Gu Yang couldn't help sighing. Even against rank 2 celestials, he didn't rely on any outer force and still reached the same level. The Dragon Blood warriors had reached the 880th stair. Whether it was in terms of will or physical body, they had reached an absolute limit. There was no way for them to advance any further. Brothers, do you see? That's our boss. He's using his own power to tell us a person's potential is limitless. As long as you are determined enough, you can surpass yourself. In truth, your strength surpasses your imagination. So brothers, what are you still waiting for? Currently, this is our limit. But do you see it? Boss is currently fighting his own limits, but us? Are we not capable of surpassing our limits as well? If we can't surpass ourselves, how are we supposed to follow boss? Remember our oath? We will make the name of our Dragon Blood Legion reverberate throughout the world. Do you still remember? Roared one of the squad leaders. Seeing Long Chen going all out without any intention of giving up, his own passion was ignited. Long Chen was fighting with all his might, but he still heard what they were saying. Despite how thick his face was, his cheeks became burning hot. Your boss has no way around this, which is why he has to do this. Do you really think I would be that stupid? But hearing that speech made the pressure on Long Chen increase even more. Even if he had to die, he had to charge up there. Otherwise, how would he have the guts to face his brothers? Fuck it. Long Chen clenched his teeth, and he suddenly charged forward. His shoulders dislocated and the immense pressure almost sent him flying. He hastily pulled one foot back to the lower stair, maintaining an equilibrium. Seeing that he didn't succeed, Shui Guanji and the others sneered. Obviously, they thought that he was just posturing. But his big words had made him seem like an idiot now. Seeing how miserable Long Chen appeared, they felt much more comfortable inside. He appeared even more miserable than they did. Meng Qi and the others' hearts clenched. Although they hadn't reached that height, it was obvious that the pressure was unimaginable just from the fact that the four heavenly geniuses had had to summon the cries of the heavenly Daos to just barely get to that level. Fuck, what is this ridiculous pressure? Is it trying to break my confidence? Long Chen snorted inside. Just now, he had truly had an urge to give up. That was a sign his negative emotions were getting out of control. Idiot, who do you think I am? I still have countless problems to deal with, and this little bit can't count as anything. If this minor setback could stop me, How would I walk to the peak of the martial path? How would I find out about my origins? How would I find my parents? How would I get revenge against whoever stole my spirit bone, blood, and root? The more he thought about it, the more furious Long Chen became. That was especially true when he recalled what he had seen in Future Lake. He had watched those hands take his spirit blood, spirit root, and spirit bone. Those negative emotions were all expelled by him. The only thing remaining was a gushing killing intent. Break! Long Chen's furious roar was like thunder. The space in front of him trembled, and he finally reached the 998th stair. He did it. Do you see, brothers? Boss has already shown us what we have to do. Continue charging, surpass your limits and surpass yourselves, cried the squad leader. Surpass our limits, surpass ourselves. The Dragon Blood Warriors' cries rang out louder and louder. It reached a level that seemed like even the sky was shaking. It was like they had been completely revived. Despite already having reached their limits, they continued pushing forward. The Xintian Dao sect's higher-ups were all stunned. Just what kind of people were they? Was a person's potential truly unlimited? When the Dragon Blood Warriors had reached the 830th stair, they had thought they would definitely not be able to reach the 840th stair. When they had reached the 840th stair, they would have bet their heads that they had reached their limits and wouldn't be able to reach the 850th stair. Even so, now they had already reached the 880th stair. The majority of them were covered in blood, with daggers stabbed throughout their bodies in the most painful places. They used pain to force back their negative emotions. However, despite having truly reached the limit, they once more continued forward with Long Chen's encouragement. If they don't fall, they will become this world's most terrifying warriors, said the Vice Sect Master. With his vision, he could clearly see that they had truly reached their limits, whether it was mentally or physically. But now they were surpassing those limits. In truth, this was just a saying, as it was fundamentally impossible. The limit people spoke of was usually only 80% of their true power. Surpassing your limits was excavating that remaining 20%. But the Dragon Blood Warriors had already excavated all that potential. The only thing allowing them to continue was willpower. If they had been in the outside world, they would have long since collapsed. But on the Netherworld Heaven staircase, as long as a person's will was strong enough, they could constantly break through their own limits. This was the strongest aspect of the Netherworld Heaven staircase, one that made it worthy of being the final trial. What, do you want to fight? As soon as Long Chen got up, Shui Guanji glared at him. Everyone watching was on edge, as they knew that Shui Guanji's enmity with Long Chen was deep. Back in the Xintian Sea, he had lost to him. Now Long Chen had just reached the 998th stair. If Shui Guanji wanted to attack, Long Chen would most likely suffer. But after this long, everyone had realized Long Chen's temperament. He was someone who dared to do anything. If Shui Guanji really did attack, Long Chen would definitely explode and counterattack with his full strength. And this time would not be the same as last time. It would definitely be a battle to the death. The Xintian Dao sect's higher-ups were all worried except for Zhou Tianyi. The person who worried the most was naturally Shui Yunsong. Of course he hoped for Shui Guanji to suppress Long Chen. But if Shui Guanji really attacked now, it would no longer be an ordinary competition. Furthermore, it was impossible for the ones outside to interfere with what was happening on the Netherworld Heaven staircase. Let alone interfering, they couldn't even say anything to them. In truth, Long Chen was also a bit uneasy. This Netherworld Heaven staircase put him at too great of a disadvantage. If Shui Guanji attacked now, he wouldn't be able to defeat him. But he coldly smiled at Shui Guanji. I've already told you, if you want to die, come at me any time. You don't need to worry so much about the timing or location. Shui Guanji was silent for a moment as he sized up Long Chen. You must be too afraid. All I did was stand up and stretch. This Netherworld Heaven staircase must restrict your magical art. Are you unable to summon your ring here? Shui Guanji stared closely at Long Chen's eyes. He had clearly seen through some clues and wanted to find the proof. Perhaps. You can try it. Long Chen smiled. Hearing Shui Guanji's words, the others were startled. Was Long Chen really unable to use his magical art on the netherworld heaven staircase? If that was true, then Long Chen was the weakest of them all here. They could send him flying with a wave of a hand. But it was impossible to tell anything from Long Chen's expression. Despite suspecting him, Shui Guanji didn't dare to actually attack him. If he was right, then it would be acceptable. But if he was wrong, and Long Chen was just stubborn and refused to summon his divine ring, he would be screwed. First, ignoring the question of whether or not he could even defeat Long Chen, just being entangled with him would put himself at a disadvantage when fighting to get the 999th stair. Furthermore, with Long Chen's temperament, it truly might be a bit dangerous. Tee, how gutless. Long Chen smiled, and just like that, he began walking toward the suspecting Shui Guanji, startling everyone. Shui Guanji immediately tensed. You really don't want to try me? Don't blame me for not giving you an opportunity. Long Chen stopped when he was around 30 meters from Shui Guanji. This distance was the absolute limit. If he took another step, the two would definitely begin to fight, unless one of them retreated. Shui Guanji's eyes were cold. He was 80% sure he was right, and Long Chen was just bluffing. But he also didn't dare to take the risk. That was because Long Chen was too mysterious. All kinds of strange things might happen around him. If his deduction was wrong and Long Chen was just baiting him, he would have to endure a tempest of attacks from him. He wasn't afraid of a battle, but he didn't want to waste his energy here. That would just be helping out the other three. You're too useless. Long Chen shook his head and walked away. You. Shui Guanji was just about to say something when he suddenly found out that Long Chen was walking straight toward the 999th stair without even resting. Everyone was shocked, even the monastery heads. What was he doing? Was this scoundrel trying to constantly test out their startled expressions? Shui Wuhan was extremely nervous. Long Chen never did things normally. During these trials, he had used up all the shocked expressions these people would get in their lifetimes. He was clearly already on the verge of collapse, but he still wanted to charge directly to the 999th stair. Was he crazy? Shui Guanji and the others were first startled, but then they smiled coldly. Currently, Long Chen had no divine ring, and furthermore, there were no spiritual yuan fluctuations coming from his body. Going to the 999th stair was purely suicidal. Is he really trying to commit suicide? Cried a monastery head. The vice sect master's eyes seemed to glow. He thought of something, but then that thought slipped away. It was like something was trying to surface in his mind, but he wasn't able to grab it. As Long Chen advanced, a flying sword shot out, piercing his leg. He stumbled, but he didn't stop. He continued climbing. Furthermore, his expression was still completely calm. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking, but they all thought he was trying to get himself killed. The instant his foot stepped onto the 999th stair, countless flying swords suddenly shot out like a tide. But Long Chen still didn't attempt to block or dodge them. He allowed them to pierce through his body. Each of them left behind a bloody hole. It was shocking how sharp those flying swords were. After all, everyone was aware of just how powerful Long Chen's physical body was. It would take incredible power to injure him. But these flying swords pierced through him so easily. That wasn't because of their shooting power, but because of how incisive they were. The four heavenly geniuses' expressions changed. Previously, they hadn't had a chance to clearly see those flying swords. Now they saw just how terrifying they were as they brought a rain of Long Chen's blood. Boom! When Long Chen's second foot touched the 999th stair, the entire netherworld heaven staircase shook intensely. Endless pressure descended. Millions of flying swords gathered together, forming one huge sword. Once that sword formed, a huge vortex appeared around it as pressure began to condense. What? Even before this sword shot out, the aura it released was apocalyptic. There was no way a human could block it. So that's what it was. The vice sect master finally came to a sudden comprehension upon seeing that huge sword. Boom! The huge sword pierced forward, instantly enveloping Long Chen. Long Chen, Meng Qi and Tang Wan'er were pale. Their hands covered their mouths, as they were filled with absolute shock. What? When the light of the swords faded, people finally saw Long Chen again. He was on the 999th stair in the same state as before the final sword had struck him. Long Chen smiled. As expected, his gamble had been right. As the light faded, the pressure around him weakened. Furthermore, his injuries began to heal. He felt endless life energy nourishing him. This is good stuff. He rapidly circulated the primal chaos space, absorbing this life energy. Previously, he had almost died from trying to refine the green dragon essence blood. To recover, he had used up all the life energy in the primal chaos space. Endless life energy surged into the primal chaos space. Those withered trees and medicinal ingredients rapidly regained their vitality. Furthermore, Long Chen's injuries were rapidly healing. Long Chen was definitely taking more than his share. While he rapidly absorbed this energy, everyone just stood there, stunned. They were unable to understand how he had done this. That final attack had released a blinding light that had made it so none of them had seen how he had survived. It had even isolated him from spiritual probing. They had no idea what technique he had used to block that final attack. I remember. The Vice Sect Master's words brought the monastery heads out of their shock and back to reality. What did you remember? They hastily asked. I remember how that previous disciple managed to charge onto the 999th stair. A complicated expression appeared on the Vice Sect Master's face. My memories are sealed, but in this special situation, they can be partially released. Just now, I remembered. It is impossible to charge onto the 999th stair. To put it more specifically, it is impossible to charge onto it through brute force. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to resist the formation. Even I would be exterminated. What? All of them turned pale. If that was true, how had Long Chen passed? The Vice Sect Master sighed. I really can't tell if Long Chen is suicidal or not. He actually managed to find out the only way to reach the 999th stair. The only way? The 999th stair doesn't test a person's physical strength, spiritual strength, or will. Instead, it tests a person's courage. It tests whether or not a person dares to risk their life to reach the peak of the martial path. You mean, the final step is just to frighten others? You can put it that way. The Netherworld Heaven Staircase won't take the lives of disciples. This is something I've already told them. But the final formation's killing intent will influence a cultivator's instincts. The stronger a person is, the more they will trust those instincts. So, the final test is just to see who dares to fight with their life on the line. Suddenly, a translucent flying sword shot down from the sky, turning one monastery head into a bloody mist. This sudden attack had come without the slightest warning. Even the Vice Sect Master hadn't had the slightest opportunity to save him. A metallic tag clattered to the ground. There was a line of words on there, but the writing was incomplete. Idiot! What did I just say? You can't record anything about the trial, or you'll be exterminated by the laws, cursed the Vice Sect Master. Obviously, this monastery head had tried to secretly record information about the final trial. But after just a few words, he was destroyed. The other monastery heads were pale with terror. That flying sword had come so suddenly that it was practically unblockable. Quite a few of them had been tempted to secretly record this information as well before their memories about this portion of the trial were wiped away. If they were aware of the final test beforehand, it would be extremely beneficial to the disciples. 2 monastery heads were even covered in cold sweat. They were both holding a steel tablet in their hands and had been about to do the same as the first one. You really are idiots. What do you think this trial is? Have you become addicted to cheating? You're truly beyond cure, said the Vice Sect Master gloomily. These people were too stupid. They had actually treated his words of advice as nonsense. This trial was the greatest foundational trial within the Shintian Dao sect. How could it be so easy to tamper with it? Boom. Suddenly, a loud explosive sound cut off the Vice Sect Master's chiding. Following the source, they saw Shui Guanji's group of 4 had once more attempted to charge onto the 999th stair. But as a result, they had only just taken one step onto it when endless swords once more forced them back. This time, they appeared even more miserable than before. "Impossible!" roared Shui Guanji. Why could Long Qin get up there, but they couldn't? Unfortunately for them, the ones watching them with the vice sect master couldn't tell them anything. They also realized why it had been so many generations since someone had managed to reach the 999th stair. Only someone as crazy as Long Chen and used to risking their life could get up there. In truth, everyone, including the vice sect master, had misjudged Long Chen. The reason he had managed to charge up to the 999th stair wasn't because he was so used to risking his life. Instead, it was the 9-star He-Gem Body Art's sharp perception and intuition that told him that the 999th stair's formation might appear to be a killing formation, but its killing intent was fake. It was able to trick other people's spiritual perception, but it was unable to trick the 9-star He-Gem Body Art. Furthermore, through some clues, he understood what the formation's purpose was. That was why he had charged up. This kind of formation would suppress you the more you resisted. Normal people definitely wouldn't dare to bet their lives. If Long Chen didn't have confidence in the 9-star He-Gem Body Art, he also wouldn't have dared. Even though he had been sure, he had still been apprehensive. This formation's deceptive ability was truly shocking. Swords once more shot out with the 4 heavenly geniuses failing once more. The 4 of them were miserable to the peak and completely covered in blood. They had tried 4 times, but no matter what they tried, they were unable to break through the formation. Their confidence was greatly shaken. Furthermore, in their perception, that terrifying sword Long Chen had been attacked with was the true attack, but they were forced back by the most preliminary attacks. That made them especially dejected. The most hateful thing was that they could see Long Chen on the 999th stair wrapped in endless energy. His aura was rapidly rising, and his injuries were also recovering quickly. That made them even more anxious. The final reward was on the 999th stair. They were afraid Long Chen would directly take it after recovering. It was just that right now, they didn't even know where the final reward was. Boom. Once more, they charged, they were injured, and they were blown back miserably. Their confidence had received an unprecedented blow. That was especially true of Zhao Wuji and Shui Guanji. Seeing Long Chen on the 999th stair, flames almost burst from their eyes. They were unable to accept that Long Chen was stronger than them. After they were once more blown back, Yu Qianshan stood up with a determined light in his eyes. This time, he didn't release his aura. Just like Long Chen, he directly charged up. Sharp swords mercilessly pierced through his body. But Yu Qianshan ignored them decisively. This child Yu Qianshan has finally made his resolve. The Wang family had smiled. Only like this could he reach the 999th stair. At this time, the 3 others also thought of a certain possibility. But they didn't immediately move. They just watched. As expected, when Yu Qianshan completely stepped onto the 999th stair, that huge sword once more appeared, bringing with it endless pressure as it slashed down on Yu Qianshan. Everyone's eyes were wide open. Yu Qianshan had no defenses up. Suddenly, the light became blinding, completely blocking their sight. After a loud explosive sound, the light disappeared and Yu Qianshan appeared not far from Long Chen. I understand. The 3 of them celebrated. Yu Qianshan had tested out a crazy theory, allowing them to understand the rules of the 999th stair. They all charged forward. This time, they didn't raise any defenses. In fact, they had to hold back their instincts or they would die. By controlling their instincts, they managed to do the same thing as Yu Qianshan and step onto the 999th stair. As soon as they did, a ball of energy wrapped around them, and their heavily injured bodies rapidly recovered. Suddenly, rumbling filled the air, and the netherworld heaven's staircase trembled. Tang Wan'er and the others who were struggling on the 958th stair suddenly felt the majority of the pressure disappear. Everyone was startled, but they quickly charged up as fast as they could. Although they didn't know what was happening, They knew they had to take advantage of this opportunity to climb to the highest place possible. The Dragonblood warriors behind them also felt that the mountain-like pressure had lightened a great deal. They immediately began to charge up. What's going on? The monastery heads were dumbfounded. Had the Netherworld Heaven Staircase lost its effect? How was this possible? The rules of the Netherworld Heaven Staircase say that only 4 people are allowed on the 999th stair at the same time. Now that there are 5 people, it has caused a strange change. If my guess is right, this is perhaps an encouragement to the others. After all, it's fundamentally impossible for those ordinary disciples to reach the 999th stair. If their will is strong enough that they can still endure even after an expert reaches the 999th stair, then that means their will is truly shocking. Perhaps this is the encouragement of the heavenly Taoists. Even the heavens have no choice but to show special consideration to them. This is an opportunity bestowed to them by the heavens, but this kind of opportunity is something only people like them can grasp. The Vice Sect Master knew a few more rules about the Netherworld Heaven Staircase than the others. The other experts looked from the ordinary disciples who had begun dropping out even before the 100th stair, to the Celestials fallen on the 830th stair. Then they looked at the Dragonblood warriors. As expected, the heavens only gave opportunities to the strong. The weak didn't even have the power to take advantage of opportunities. They've reached the 998th stair. They were all shocked. Meng Qi and the others had surged all the way up to the 998th stair. But in truth, they were unaware that 90% of the pressure had disappeared, which was the only reason they had managed to charge up there. The other Dragonblood warriors also reached that height. They were completely exhausted, but that couldn't conceal their excitement. Brothers, it's the last step. Our Dragonblood Legion followed our boss out of seas of blood, and today we've fought another fierce battle. Gu Yang stepped onto the 999th stair. The secret of the 999th stair was no longer a secret. Wasn't it just some pain? That was nothing to the Dragonblood warriors. As for braving the sensation of death, each of them had crawled out from a pile of corpses. If they really were afraid of death, they wouldn't have charged their way into the first monastery to fight with Long Chen when they had clearly known it was just sending themselves to their deaths. Sharp blades pierced through their bodies and blood dyed the stairs. But none of them made a sound. They didn't even frown. Instead, they were filled with pride. They had finally followed in Long Chen's footsteps. They were on the same stair as him. That was their glory. The sight of all of them standing on the 999th stair was deeply imprinted in the experts' heads. Over 360 people were now enveloped in light that was healing their bodies. Furthermore, they all entered a special state, and to them, it was like time was standing still. This is the blessing of the Netherworld Heaven Staircase. It contains the principles of innumerable Taoists. Although they will only comprehend a trace, it will bring them endless benefits. This is the true reward. The fact that they can obtain it means that these people really are geniuses amongst geniuses. Praised the Vice Sect Master. Perhaps the only truth of the heavenly Taoists is that there is no absolute right and wrong, said Shui Wuhan as she looked at a rank 2 celestial lying on the 666th stair. 3 days later, the Netherworld Heaven Staircase trembled and everyone was suddenly awakened from their special state. They saw that a large platform had appeared at the top. Everyone awoke, both the group of disciples on the 999th stair and the ones on the stairs below. When the ones below crawled up and saw that the 999th stair was full of people, they were incomparably shocked. You guys really didn't let me down. It was worth me doing my best to encourage you," shouted Gua Ran unashamedly when he saw all the Dragonblood warriors had reached the 999th stair. The other disciples on the 666th stair glanced at him. They couldn't help but feel admiration. The thickness of his face was practically unrivaled beneath the heavens. The staircase trembled as a huge platform rose from the 999th stair. It was dozens of square miles, and the ancient runes carved into it released a majestic pressure. Just as everyone was wondering what to do, They were suddenly teleported off from the staircase. What? Why are we teleported off? What about our rewards? Asked Guyang. Everyone except Long Chen and the four heavenly geniuses had appeared on the same stage as the monastery heads and the vice sect leader. They could only watch the netherworld heaven staircase from a distance. You should be content. If it weren't for Long Chen and the four heavenly geniuses, do you really think you could have gotten to the 999th stair? The benefits you've gained from the 999th stair far surpass your imagination, so be happy. Sighed one of the monastery heads. It really was a case of humans never knowing when enough was enough. They actually wanted to gain more treasures? These monastery heads didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Balls of light appeared beside Long Chen and the four heavenly geniuses. There were only 5 treasures for the 5 of them. Shui Guanji took out a scale armor, and each scale was the size of a nail. There were natural lines on it that sparkled with divine light. Damn it, all the good stuff is taken up by pigs. A dog's luck really is good. Long Chen couldn't help cursing. That armor looked incredibly powerful. It seemed like a high-grade enchanted item. Shui Guanji was delighted. Suddenly, he bit his finger and dripped a drop of blood onto the armor. The armor's runes lit up for a moment before dimming again. Long Chen knew that this level of enchanted item needed blood to recognize a master. This left a brand on the item, and only then could you release its power. This idiot had clearly struck gold. The next person to reach in was Zhao Wuji. He took out a long whip 8 feet long. It was unknown what material it was made of, but a red light danced along it that made it seem alive. With just a glance, it was obvious it was no ordinary item. It was also a high-grade enchanted item. Zhao Wuji tested the whip, and a simple flick caused space to tremble. That power was truly shocking. But Zhao Wuji had clearly never used this kind of weapon before. After swinging it a few times, he ended up striking his own toe. The skin broke and Zhao Wuji clenched his teeth in pain. People were shocked by how powerful the whip was and how easily it broke his defense. But it was funny that a grand celestial would end up injuring himself with his own weapon. Zhao Wuji's expression was ugly. This was a good weapon, but unsuitable to him. It was also a red color, clearly for a woman. Zhong Wuyan's expression was also a bit ugly as she took out an incomparably huge hatchet. Although she had been prepared, its weight caused it to clang onto the stair. Sparks flew. The hatchet was too big. It was also a high-grade enchanted item, but it was completely useless to Zhong Wuyan. She could only go to see if she could trade it for something better in the Shantian Dao sect afterward. It was the same as Zhao Wuji. Both their weapons might be high-grade, but only a few people used them. The odds of them managing to trade for weapons on the same grade that they could use were low, so they were unhappy. As for Yu Qianshan, everyone was startled to see him pull out a stalk of grass. The grass was 2 feet long and half an inch thick. It looked just like a dagger. Its edges were sawtoothed, and strange marks were present on it. Heavenly sword grass. Yu Qianshan suddenly burst into laughter. He seemed like a completely different person from his previous icy, arrogant self. Long Chen immediately recognized it. This heavenly sword grass was a strange item. It innately possessed the will of the sword Dao and could help people comprehend it. It was a priceless treasure to a sword cultivator like Yu Qianshan. Even the distant Yu Zifeng looked at it enviously. This grass possessed a fatal attraction to any sword cultivator. If you could comprehend the energy inside it, it was said that you could gain a chance to become a god. Although gods were just legends that no one had ever seen, it still didn't change the fact that the heavenly sword grass was a treasure that sword cultivators would long for even in their dreams. Seeing 3 of them obtain high-grade enchanted items and Yu Qianshan obtain a treasure perfectly suited for him, Long Chen was much more at ease. It seemed all the rewards here were top-grade treasures. He reached his hand into the last ball of light. Despite knowing that he was picking from the highest grade rewards of the Netherworld Heaven Staircase, he was still a bit nervous. He didn't immediately pull it out. It definitely wasn't boots. It also definitely wasn't a belt. It felt soft and flexible. He felt bumps. It should be from complicated runic marks. Long Chen was delighted, thinking he had finally obtained a treasure. When he pulled it out and revealed the treasure, Everyone became deathly silent. It was red, woven from the finest silk. Two exquisite birds flapping their wings were embroidered onto it. Blouse. Everyone was dumbfounded. That was clearly a woman's garment, not some treasure. It was not an enchanted item, and no fluctuations could be felt from it. It was clearly just an ordinary piece of clothing. After a moment, laughter broke the stunned silence. A grand genius like Long Chen had actually obtained a blouse as a reward for the 999th stare? That shocking scene was too comical. Everyone was laughing. The only one not laughing was the vice sect master. Looking at the blouse, he was filled with shock. It had to be known that the chance of obtaining trash on the 999th stair was less than 1 in 100,000. He had run this trial many times. He had seen millions of disciples pick out their treasures. But he had never seen such a scenario. Experts had to possess karmic luck, or they would die prematurely. Even the ordinary disciples, as long as they had the qualifications to attend this trial, they had to be people blessed with karmic luck. And the netherworld heaven staircase innately bestowed karmic luck onto the disciples on it. The percentages for obtaining treasures was based on having no karmic luck. But in truth, it was almost impossible for geniuses, people blessed by the heavens, to pull out trash. In all his years, after seeing millions of disciples attending, he had only ever seen one disciple pull out trash, and that had been on the 333rd stair. As for on the 666th stair, he had never seen anyone pull out trash. He had also gone through the history books. In hundreds of generations, no one had ever pulled out trash on the 666th stair. By the 999th stair, the rewards were all peak treasures. The odds of trash were basically non-existent. Although he didn't have the qualifications to go through the other 4 regions' records, he trusted that trash had never appeared on them. One time was a coincidence, and twice was a miracle. But then what about the third time? Heaven-defying? Then could it be that Long Chen? But that's impossible. Such people can't live this long. The vice sect master was completely bewildered. Long Chen, this blouse is not bad. Didn't you get a belt previously? You should put the blouse on too. Zhong Huiyan suddenly laughed, delighting at his misfortune. I've never worn such a thing. Can Sister Zhong help me by demonstrating how to wear it? Long Chen directly tossed the blouse to Zhong Huiyan. Her expression sank. With a wave of her hand, the blouse was blown apart. You despicable peon, shameless to the peak. Long Chen was infuriated. How was she any better than him in this situation? Why be so temperamental? I just wanted you to try it on. Furthermore, I didn't even ask you to take off the rest of your clothes to do it. You could have just put it on over clothes, but you were too embarrassed about your chest. You could have worn it backward. In any case, your back is just as flat as your chest, so the effect would be the same. Everyone was startled. Long Chen's mouth was a bit too vicious, wasn't it? But quite a few people ended up looking toward Zhong Huiyan's chest. As expected, it was a flat plain, a plain so flat that a horse could gallop on it. Tang Wen'o was laughing uncontrollably while Meng Qi was shaking her head. Long Chen was like the ancestor of all scoundrels. Zhong Huiyan really had been asking for it by insulting him. Even if you cultivated for 100 years, you wouldn't be able to beat him in this aspect. Die! Zhong Huiyan erupted in fury and punched Long Chen. She appeared in front of him without anyone even seeing how she had moved. As expected, none of the 4 heavenly geniuses was weak. A faint layer of light covered her fist. Space seemed as if it was being torn apart, and an ear-piercing sound rang out. Long Chen saw that her fist was strange, so he didn't take it head-on. He dodged, appearing several meters away. His movements were strange. They looked as if someone had tied an invisible string to him and had pulled him. His dodging movements didn't make any sense physically to others, and Zhong Huiyan's fist ended up hitting nothing but air. If a flat woman like you is still alive, why should I go to die? Long Chen shook his head. Zhong Huiyan was ashen with rage. She was just about to erupt with her full strength when a small table rose from the center of the platform in front of them. There was a foot-high jade case on the table. The final treasure has appeared. As soon as that small table appeared, Long Chen and the others charged over. They all knew that was the Netherworld Heaven Staircase's final and top reward. Although they didn't know what was inside, for it to appear now, even an idiot would know how important it was. Water Dragon Twister. Long Chen had only just gotten to the top of the platform when a huge water dragon condensed and shot towards him. Long Chen snorted. Circulating his spiritual yuan, he directly punched the water dragon. The powerful water dragon was directly blown apart. Water droplets splashed everywhere. After condensing the Enlightenment Palace star, Long Chen's strength was incomparable to his previous self. Back then, this water dragon had been difficult for him to deal with. The main reason was that the water dragon absorbed his energy. But after condensing the Enlightenment Palace star, even though it was just an initial form, his power had reached a point where the water dragon was unable to do anything. In his punch just now, he had concentrated his power, making it so the water dragon wasn't able to absorb much of anything. It was directly blown apart. That startled Shui Guanji. He had never expected Long Chen's power to grow by so much in just a few days. Had he been hiding his power? Great earthen wall. Zhao Wuji slammed his hands on the ground. A huge earthen wall blocked Long Chen's path. Long Chen was just about to test the power of this wall when the sound of whistling wind came at him. He hastily punched out to meet it. Boom. This wind, which was released by a punch from Zhong Wein, knocked him back 3 steps. Long Chen was startled by how powerful she was. Suddenly, cold sword chi stabbed at him from behind. It came so quickly that Long Chen had no time to react. The tip had almost reached his back when he instinctively dodged to the side. But the tip still tore through his robes. Clamor erupted outside. How was it that the 4 heavenly geniuses were all targeting Long Chen together? What are you doing? Long Chen icily stared at the 4 of them. At this time, do you still have to ask such a stupid question? Are you a pig? I've already said that this battlefield is not yours. A bumpkin is a bumpkin. Although your luck might be good and you've managed to crawl to this height, that doesn't represent that you have the qualifications to stand shoulder to shoulder with us, understood? Sneered Shui Guanji. Zhao Wuji said, Long Chen, if you're smart, you'll immediately scram. Although I really want to beat you up, now's not the time. So if you don't want to get beaten, get the fuck out of here. Zhong Wein also icily said, if you leave now, you can still maintain a bit of your despicable dignity. The treasure here has no fate with you, so you can leave now. Even the always silent Yu Qianshan opened his mouth. Just now, I was already merciful. If I had wanted to kill you, you wouldn't have been able to dodge. The 4 of them had actually decided to work together to get rid of Long Chen from the competition before deciding who would obtain the final treasure. Seeing this, the spectators were all shocked. Against the 4 of them, Long Chen would only be able to leave. But this result was unacceptable to many. This was going too far. The 4 heavenly geniuses were the apex figures in the Shintian Dao sect. How could they work together against someone in the same realm? Isn't this going too far? Raged the 36th Supermonastery's disciples. Idiots, how is it too far? Doesn't Long Chen like to show off? It's normal for people to find him irritating and want him to fuck off as soon as possible, ridiculed a disciple from another supermonastery. Suddenly, the sound of bones breaking rang out, accompanied by a miserable scream. That person had barely finished speaking before a dragon blood warrior had charged over and punched him in the nose. Pay attention to your words. Don't insult our boss again. If it weren't for the robes you're wearing, you would already be a corpse, he said coldly. Intolerable. How dare you attack others? An outraged crowd gathered. Stop! One of the monastery heads shouted, now you have the strength to fight? Why didn't you have this strength on the Netherworld Heaven Staircase? Scram. The dragon blood warrior snorted and returned to his camp. As for the person with the broken nose, although there was no danger to his life, his blood and tears intertwined, making him appear incredibly wretched. But this wasn't the place to fight, and he could only swallow his anger. Will Long Chen be all right? Asked Tang Wanner worriedly. Sister-in-law, don't worry. That's our boss. Boss is unrivaled. So what if he's fighting the 4 heavenly geniuses? said Guoran completely confidently. In the Dragonblood warrior's eyes, Long Chen was no longer a human, but a god, an undefeatable battle god. They had more trust in Long Chen than anyone. That deep-rooted trust said that their boss was undefeatable. Guoran's words caused quite a few disdainful snorts from the other supermonastery's disciples. The 4 heavenly geniuses had countless worshippers. The only reason they didn't say anything was because the 36th supermonastery had those unreasonable country bumpkins. They might get attacked just by saying something. The Dragonblood warriors felt that talking to these hypocrites who only knew how to use their mouths was a humiliation to them, so it was better to just directly use their fists. The vice sect master didn't say anything, nor did he reveal any expression. He simply watched those figures, lost in thought. At this moment, the 4 of them had blocked Long Chen's path forward. He sneered, "The reason you're working together against me is because you're afraid of me. This is the 4 heavenly geniuses? What happened to your dignity?" "Afraid of you? Tisich, you're nothing," shouted Zhao Wuji. Long Chen ignored him, continuing, "The 4 of you understand each other much more than you understand me. You know each other's techniques, cultivation techniques, and fighting styles. But you know nothing about me or my true bottom line. The fact that I was the first to step onto the 999th stair has made you afraid. If you really had any confidence, if you really had any pride, you would never have done this. If you really believed you were unrivaled, how could you worry about that? Dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes. Having been raised by those wily foxes, you've also become so hypocritical. The cultivation path is inherently a path of struggle. It's understandable that you would do this, so why must you refuse to admit it? You clearly want to cheat, but why do you still want to act so grand? Why bother with this act? This is all I'll say. The treasure is mine, and anyone who fights over it with me will have their 5 limbs broken, cough. Well, some people will only have 4 limbs broken." Long Chen suddenly realized he had misspoken, but it was too late to take back those words. The outsiders looked at Long Chen oddly. His previous words had actually made sense, but then they ended up being so wretched. Scoundrel, rogue, shameless to the peak. Zhongwen gnashed her teeth. She had naturally realized that his correction was because of her. "At least it's better than you sanctimonious hypocrites." "At least I accept what I do," sneered Long Chen. Shui Guanji, Zhao Wuji, Zhongwen, and Yu Qinshan's expressions were exceedingly ugly. Long Chen's words were extremely insulting and clearly a slap to their faces. Furthermore, his words were right. The reason they wanted to kick Long Chen out first was because they were intimidated by him. They knew too little about him. The 4 of them knew about each other's abilities, and so they felt more confident against each other. Long Chen was an unknown variable that made them uncertain. Although Long Chen's words had been the truth, they didn't want to admit it. Thus, having been exposed by Long Chen, they were infuriated. They glanced at each other and immediately came to a consensus. They weren't going to just kick him out of here. They were going to take his life. If just one of them killed him, he or she would receive a heavy punishment. But if Long Chen was killed in a brawl between the 5 of them, there was no way the Xintian Dao sect could punish them so heavily. Killing intent immediately formed in their hearts. "What the fuck, you're actually plotting to kill me?" Suddenly, Long Chen's figure disappeared as the 4 of them looked at each other. Just like a specter, he appeared in front of each of them, his hands slapping across their faces. Pow! A crisp and clear sound rang out. His speed was so fast that the 4 slaps sounded like one. "What?" From the disciples to the monastery heads, their jaws could not be lower. It was practically possible to see the food in their stomachs from their open mouths. How could they not be shocked? Long Chen had actually slapped all 4 of them at the same time, and not one of them had managed to block. This face-slapping art had reached a supernatural level. How could he slap the faces of the 4 heavenly geniuses at the same time? Although his face-slapping divine ability had been trained and refined to a supernatural level, to slap 4 people at the same time was still a challenge for Long Chen. He had only managed to accomplish it because of their cooperation. When the 4 of them had communicated with their eyes, They had never imagined Long Chen would dare to take the initiative to attack them. Furthermore, Long Chen's control over the netherworld ghost steps had reached the pinnacle. As for his face-slapping art, there was no need to say anything. There was no killing intent or killing power, so of course the four of them hadn't sensed anything. As a result, they had all been slapped at the same time, allowing them to go down in history. It could be said that this was a milestone for the cultivation world's face-slapping arts. The slap didn't really hurt. After a brief, stunned moment, they suddenly roared, their auras surging. Their cries of the heavenly Daos erupted, and their terrifying killing intent soared into the sky. Long Chen, you'll definitely die. The four of them roared furiously and attacked at the same time. Their killing intent was soaring as they all went berserk. As peerless geniuses, being slapped in the face made them feel even worse than being killed. Of course, they went berserk. Countless runes appeared around them, and a powerful pressure caused space to twist. Just their aura was enough to terrify rank 1 celestials. It just so happens that I can use you to test my power. Divine Ring. Long Chen's divine ring appeared behind him, causing a loud rumbling. Astral winds raged as it seemed like heaven and earth were trembling. But this time was different from before. There was a faint green color within the 3-color ring. Its color was faint, but it was still visible. This was Long Chen's first time summoning the divine ring after condensing the Enlightenment Palace star. His spiritual yuan gushed forth from his body. Long Chen roared thunderously, and it was like he was possessed by a battle god who arrogantly looked down on them. With a single punch, a terrifying pressure locked down the four of them. The spectators were all shocked. Just how heaven-defying was Long Chen? Even in the face of the four heavenly geniuses, he still didn't take a single step back. Boom! The platform shuddered, but the runes carved into it made it extremely stable. It wasn't the slightest bit damaged. 5 figures blew back. Long Chen was blown back a few dozen meters before stabilizing while Zhao Wuji and the others were blown back by just 10 meters. They looked at him with shock. He can actually manage to fight all 4 of them? Stammered a shocked disciple. Long Chen had only just stabilized his body when he once more shot forward nimbly, arriving in front of the closest one, Shui Guanji. Sky Water Shield. Boom. Shui Guanji's water shield exploded. He was sent flying by Long Chen's fist. He was completely shocked. It had to be known that he was no longer the same Shui Guanji that Long Chen had previously defeated. Within the Shentian Sea, his comprehension over the water element had increased to a whole new level. His water energy was much purer. Furthermore, on the 9 Netherworld path, his spiritual strength had been improved to an unprecedented level. His Skywater shield was at least twice as powerful as before. But it was still unable to bear a single punch from Long Chen. How could he not be shocked? Long Chen had just sent Shui Guanji flying when he felt the wind behind him. Without even looking, he smashed his arm backward. His elbow ended up colliding with a huge fist. That attack had come from Zhao Wuji. Both of them were blown back. Because Long Chen had only had time for a hurried block, he had been unable to use his full strength. As a result, he had been at a slight disadvantage. But Zhao Wuji was appalled. Long Chen was absolutely terrifying. This was his first time running into someone with such a powerful physical body. Zhong Wuyan's hands suddenly blossomed with light. With simple waves of her hand, dazzling fist images slammed toward him. At the same time, a chilling sword chi rose. Yu Qianshan also attacked. Long Chen didn't even look at Zhong Wuyan's fist images. He directly slammed his fist toward her flat chest. Lightning rushing hand. Zhong Wuyan directly switched from offense to defense. Seeing him come at her in such a suicidal way, she naturally was not willing to be injured. As a result, she was forced back by Long Chen's punch, feeling an ache from her hand. She couldn't help being shocked by his powerful thunder force. As soon as Long Chen forced back Zhong Wuyan, he spun around and clapped his thunder force-shrouded hands together. He caught a simple sword between his hands. The tip was less than an inch from his heart. Yu Qianshan hastily tried to pull back his sword, but when it came to physical strength, he couldn't compare to Long Chen. His sword was stuck in Long Chen's grasp. My brother is also a sword cultivator. Compared to him, you're just trash. Scram. Long Chen suddenly slammed the sword's hilt into Yu Qianshan's chest. He was blown back and almost coughed up blood. But he clamped his mouth shut and swallowed it back down, not letting others see that he had been injured by Long Chen. Although he hid it very well, the monastery heads all saw through it. Long Chen's attack just now had shaken his organs. That injury was negligible and could be instantly healed, but it was still shocking. Shui Guanji's water dragons suddenly appeared and attacked him. This time, hundreds of them appeared at the same time while Shui Guanji himself was hiding in the distance, not giving Long Chen a chance to attack him. Long Chen smiled coldly. Last time, these water dragons had given him a headache. But now, his power had risen to a point that these water dragons were unable to threaten him. Furthermore, he saw that Shui Guanji was acting craftily. These water dragons weren't to attack him, but to give him some pressure. He was leaving attacking to the others. Zhao Wuji and Zhong Wian both charged at him. Long Chen met their torrential attacks with his fists. Long Chen, let's see just how you survive today. Zhong Wian ground her teeth. There are many people who want my life, but I'm still alive. Who do you think you are to threaten me? Sneered Long Chen. Bastard, you dash. Careful. The distant let out a cry. Long Chen suddenly used his back to receive Zhao Wuji's fist. With a muffled bang, Long Chen borrowed Zhao Wuji's punch to shoot like lightning toward Zhong Wen. The thunder force on his fists brightened as he smashed his fist at her. Boom. Although Shui Guanji had given her a warning, Zhong Wen was still sent flying. She was not Long Chen's match in strength. The only reason she was able to exchange blows with him was because of the light on her hands. That was her bloodline energy. It was different from ordinary spiritual yuan and extremely powerful. But even so, when Long Chen attacked her with full strength, she was unable to completely block him. Before she could stabilize, Long Chen's fist had arrived. This fist was even stronger. He didn't give her any breathing room. Zhong Wen was shocked by Long Chen's attack power. Once Long Chen grasped an opening, he would attack until his opponent was defeated. She no longer had any room to counterattack. She could only focus on defense. But Long Chen had taken the advantage, and she would definitely be heavily injured by blocking this fist. Annihilation slash. Just as his fist was about to reach her, sword chi came slashing toward him. Without even turning back, Long Chen knew it was Yu Qianshan's attack. Even before the sword chi reached him, he felt a chill in his bones. A sword cultivator's attack was just that terrifying. Now if he wanted to attack Zhong Wuyan, he would have to take Yu Qianshan's attack directly. Although he was confident in heavily injuring her and making her lose her ability to fight temporarily, a sword cultivator's attack couldn't be received lightly. Even Long Chen didn't dare to do so rashly. He spun on his left foot, and the attack meant for Zhong Wen was used to block a 300-meter sword chi. That sword chi was incredibly powerful, and it seemed as if space was being directly sliced apart by it. Boom. Long Chen was actually sent flying by Yu Qianshan's sword chi. Sword cultivators are truly worthy of being the #1 attackers. They're terrifying. The disciples were all shocked. Long Chen's display so far had shocked them. His power was enough to fight the 4 heavenly geniuses. But previously, Yu Qianshan hadn't used his strongest attacks. Now that he was finally releasing his full strength, it was enough to send Long Chen flying. Careful! After sending Long Chen flying, Yu Qianshan's expression suddenly changed. Long Chen was sent flying. But he was sent flying straight toward Shui Guanji. Just at that moment, Long Chen stamped his foot on the ground and increased his speed, shooting like a cannonball at Shui Guanji. The light on his fists became blinding. You absolutely can't block it, shouted Yu Qianshan. He knew Long Chen had allowed himself to be blown back intentionally. Furthermore, he realized that Long Chen had used some unknown technique to absorb a portion of his strength. In other words, Long Chen's fist didn't just contain his personal power, but a portion of Yu Qianshan's power. That was why Yu Qianshan gave him such a solemn warning. Heaven trapping water prison. Even without Yu Qianshan's warning, Shui Guanji could sense the terrifying power contained in Long Chen's fist. He directly summoned a huge water prison that surrounded Long Chen. Long Chen sneered and directly sent forth a fist. Boom! That huge water prison instantly exploded. But Long Chen's attack continued onward to strike Shui Guanji. Shui Guanji was directly sent flying, wildly vomiting blood. Long Chen's fist didn't just contain his own power. When Yu Qianshan had attacked him, he had also stealthily absorbed a small part of his sword's power. Unlike some magical arts, he couldn't absorb 50% or more of his opponent's power. He was only capable of absorbing a trace of it. But just that trace was enough. Long Chen was just borrowing that trace of energy to release a long-range attack similar to Sword Qi. However, this attack wasn't perfect. The heaven-trapping water prison had blocked 70% of its power, so Shui Guanji had only been struck by 30%. But if Shui Guanji hadn't summoned the heaven-trapping water prison, then in his careless state, even if he wasn't instantly defeated, he would still be heavily injured. The spectators were stunned to see Shui Guanji be injured and vomit blood. Why can't I understand any of it?" muttered one disciple. Most of them were unable to tell what had just happened. At the start, everyone had assumed Long Chen was fated to have a miserable ending from being attacked by all of the four heavenly geniuses. There had even been quite a few people who had felt pity for him, outraged by the injustice. But as soon as they exchanged blows, that thought became non-existent. It wasn't Long Chen being miserably suppressed, but the four of them. How is this happening? Just how terrifying is Long Chen? One of the monastery heads couldn't help but open his mouth to express his shock. The most shocked ones were Shui Yunzong and the other family heads. It had to be known that the four heavenly geniuses were the four families' strongest junior generation disciples. The fact that they would be suppressed by Long Chen was unacceptable to them. Long Chen should have technically counted as an expert on the side of the Shui family, but it seemed that up until now, Shui Wuhan had no intention of pulling him into the Shui family. Ever since her falling out with her family, Shui Wuhan had already become completely disappointed in them. What had happened in the Xiantian Sea had made their relationship even worse. Once Shui Guanji had taken the lead to kick Long Chen out, their relationship became even worse. The disharmony was gradually escalating. Although Shui Wuhan hadn't said anything, everyone could already see that she would no longer stand on the side of the Shui family. The current Shui Wuhan no longer possessed any loyalty to them. With a talented disciple like Long Chen and the favor of the vice sect master, Shui Wuhan could not be touched by the Shui family. Now Shui Yunzong was slightly regretting having Shui Guanji suppress Long Chen to force Shui Wuhan to lower her head to him. If he had known Long Chen was so powerful, he would have formed a better relationship with Shui Wuhan and pull Long Chen to his side. At that time, his Shui family would have had two peerless geniuses. Amongst the four families, who would be able to contend with them then? But now that was too late. Both Shui Guanji and Long Chen viewed the other as an enemy. Although it hadn't reached the point of either you die or I die, it seemed it wasn't that far off either. In truth, the power Long Chen has displayed isn't much stronger than any one of them, said the vice sect master. What? Everyone was startled. If he wasn't so much stronger, how could he suppress the four of them? The power he is displaying is truly not that much different than them. Even if it's greater, it's only by a slight amount. It's just that his battle experience gives him a huge advantage. Each time they use any technique, he immediately sees through their weak points and launches a sharp attack. So the four of them are completely flustered. Can you not see that the four of them clearly are too immature compared to Long Chen? Yu Qianshan and Zhong Wen attacked at the same time. Theoretically, Long Chen would have had to use his back to receive one of their attacks. But what actually happened? As soon as he saw them attacking, he took the initiative to break their rhythm. Before they could even launch their attacks, he charged at Zhong Wen, forcing her back, and then went to handle Yu Qianshan, who possesses the greatest offensive strength. Now look, Zhao Weij and Shui Guanji's water dragons are about to attack him. Long Chen takes a single step back, dodging the attack of the water dragon. Now the water dragon blocks Zhao Wuji's line of sight, making his movements slower. He has pulled back his original attack. Before he prepares a new attack, Long Chen attacks him. The four of them have no idea how to cooperate. Long Chen is easily grasping their openings. He's playing with them in the palm of his hand. This doesn't show that Long Chen is particularly powerful, but simply that their cooperation is chaotic. Having more people isn't necessarily a good thing. They aren't able to bring out their true power. Hearing this, everyone came to a sudden realization. They managed to see the crux of the matter. The rhythm of the battle was entirely under Long Chen's control. Although Shui Guanji, Zhao Wuji, Yu Qianshan, and Zhong Wen have also fought with the corrupt path, it was only a few times. But you all know that Long Chen has experienced more life and death battles than anyone. He can rely on just his battle instincts to dodge their attacks. Thus, they are suppressed. Have you noticed that many attacks coming for his back are accurately blocked by him without him even looking? This is the difference between geniuses raised behind a fence and a demon produced by the wilderness, said the vice sect master. Everyone smiled at the final joke. But then they were lost in thought. Long Chen had shown them many shocking things. They had to slowly digest them. Haha, do you see? This is our boss. Even 1 against 4, he can still defeat them. Who was that brat who wanted to show off just now? Come out here and fart again, sneered Guoran at the opposing crowd. Those people naturally didn't dare to say anything anymore. They were all intimidated by Long Chen's terrifying combat abilities. They had never imagined that the undefeatable heroes in their hearts would still be suppressed when they worked together against one person. Does this mean Long Chen will win? Probed a monastery head. How could it be so easy? The 4 heavenly geniuses aren't stupid. They'll sooner or later find the crux of the problem, said another monastery head. Bang! Zhao Wuji was kicked in the stomach by Long Chen and sent flying, vomiting blood. He furiously roared, "Fuck, I don't care. I'm not cooperating with you bastards anymore." Zhao Wuji felt too stifled. In this kind of battle, he wasn't even able to bring out half his power. Either he was afraid of injuring his own people, or he was afraid of his own people's attacks landing on him. He had been blown back by Long Chen several times now, infuriating him so much that his teeth creaked. The Great Earth's protection. A set of yellow armor appeared on his body. Long Chen's heart shook. He sensed endless energy surging into Zhao Wuji from the ground. Die! Zhao Wuji charged. The ground shook with each step he took. Long Chen was startled to find that he had been locked in place by the earth. He was unable to dodge this attack. Boom! Long Chen blocked with his full strength, but he still felt like a wild bull had rammed into him. He vomited blood and tumbled back, landing hundreds of meters away. Pain radiated from his arms. They had actually broken. He was shocked. Zhao Wuji was actually this powerful. Haha, Zhao Wuji has finally released his full strength. Who does Long Chen think he is? The 4 of them were just playing with him before. Now that they're serious, Long Chen will be completely suppressed. One disciple laughed. That was the disciple whose nose had been broken. He had already recovered now, and he had also grown smarter. He said his words while hiding in the crowd, not letting the Dragon Blood warriors get close. How stupid! Boss's strength isn't something you ants can comprehend, sneered Guoran. Currently, Guoran was a rank 2 celestial. He could also count as a heavenly genius. However, he didn't have any awareness of that status and started cursing that lowly disciple. Long Chen slowly stood back up. He wiped some blood from his mouth. Looking at Zhao Wuji, he said, "Looks like you're the stupidest one here. The others are all holding back to fight for the final treasure, but you've already revealed your full strength. When the true fight starts, you'll still lose the final reward. The reason the others haven't done the same as you is because they were waiting for you. And as expected, you really didn't let them down." Long Chen's voice was full of ridicule. He had long since guessed what the 4 of them were thinking. They wanted to maintain their peak condition for the fight amongst themselves. That was the only reason he had suppressed them. One reason was truly because of his profound battle experience, while the other reason was that they were intentionally maintaining this kind of situation. Although he didn't know if this was what they had been thinking of at the beginning, after he had released his strength, he knew that they had begun to think this. Long Chen's words caused the spectators to be greatly disappointed. If this was true, then these heavenly geniuses were truly embarrassing. What nonsense! Don't try to drive a wedge between us. You sinister wretch, just shut your mouth, sneered Shui Guanji. To the other three he said, everyone, let's all not hold back. The warm-up is over. Let's immediately kick Long Chen out and then have a fair fight for the final treasure. Warm-up? The spectators couldn't help being stunned. This kind of terrifying fight was just a warm-up? You're right, the warm-up should end. Let's start the real fight. Long Chen smiled and then disappeared. Long Chen suddenly disappeared, startling them. His speed was too fast. When they finally caught sight of him again, he was already in front of Shui Guanji. Shui Guanji hastily fell back, water runes forming a huge shield in front of him. Thunder filled the air. Long Chen no longer was fighting with his fists. A 3-meter lightning spear had appeared in his hand. The water shield was pierced as easily as paper by the lightning spear. The lightning spear continued toward Shui Guanji after breaking through his defense. Shui Guanji did his best to dodge, but he was still struck in the shoulder. Blood splashed along with Shui Guanji's miserable cry. His shoulder had been smashed to bits. His arm flew into the air. Long Chen's gaze was like blades. Endless lightning swam around him from his lightning spear. Of the 4 of you, you're the weakest. But your mouth is the most wretched. Who can compare to you in terms of wretchedness? Sneered Long Chen. Shui Guanji's mouth was truly loathsome. Combined with his disdainful expression, Long Chen's fury was ignited. Previously, Long Chen had fought them barehanded and thus they had gotten used to his attack range and tempo. But now that he had suddenly changed to a lightning spear, he almost one-shot Shui Guanji. That attack had been aimed at Shui Guanji's heart. If he hadn't reacted fast enough, it would have killed him. Everyone was stunned. The fellow who had once cursed Guoran kept his mouth tightly shut now. Long Chen is a lightning cultivator? Last time, Long Chen hadn't used any thunder force when fighting Shui Guanji. Had he been holding back? In truth, Long Chen hadn't been holding back. It was just that Lei Long and Hua Long had rushed off to eat. As for the lightning rushing hand he had used, that had been shocking, but there were quite a few battle skills that could transform a person's spiritual yuan into elemental energy. It wasn't so rare. But this lightning spear was no battle skill. Only an elemental cultivator would be able to condense a spirit weapon like this. Everyone, don't hold back. Zhong Wuyan was the first to recover from her shock. She formed a hand seal, and a strange mark appeared in her eyes. Ancestral blood support. Her heavenly Dao runes actually transformed, taking the same shape as the mark in her eyes. Those runes slowly condensed into a pair of blood-colored wings. She slowly rose into the sky, looking down on Long Chen. Her aura had erupted to a completely new level. A powerful pressure descended. Even the distant disciples felt like the blood in their bodies was about to solidify. This is the might of King's blood. Long Chen, now you should understand the difference between us. In front of this absolute pressure, there's no way for you to fight back. Zhong Wuyan arrogantly looked down on Long Chen. King's blood? What's that used for? Making blood tofu? Blood sausage? Blood pudding? Sneered Long Chen. This was another bloodline suppression. Perhaps against others it was useful, but with the circulation of his divine ring, he could essentially ignore that suppression. You dare insult my grand bloodline? You really deserve to die. Zhong Wuyan's wings flapped and she shot toward Long Chen, her speed incomparable. Others were unable to even see her. Boom! Long Chen slammed his lightning spear forward. Despite digging his feet into the ground, he was knocked back hundreds of meters away. How powerful! This isn't the power of her physical body, but the support of her bloodline runes. Curious. A solemn expression appeared on Long Chen's face. As expected, none of the 4 heavenly geniuses were easy to deal with. Although Shui Guanji was on the same level as the rest of them, that was just because his element restrained the other three. In truth, Shui Guanji was the weakest of them. 10,000 sword formation. The sky darkened. At some unknown point, over 10,000 swords had appeared beside Yu Qianshan. Those weren't true swords, they were condensed from his spiritual yuan. Each one of them contained the will of the sword Dao. They turned into rays of light that shot toward Long Chen. Heavens, that's Yu Qianshan's supreme technique. He's trying to kill Long Chen. Some of the disciples recognized this move because they had borne witness to its power before. In one of the righteous and corrupt battles, Yu Qianshan had used this move to slaughter countless corrupt experts. The move's power was terrifying, and its scope was huge, making it almost impossible to dodge or block. A person could only wait to be killed once he launched this move. Sword cultivators were claimed to be number one in terms of attack prowess. Seeing these swords shooting forward, it truly seemed like this was a power no man could block. Long Chen was instantly swallowed by the horde of swords. Shockingly, the ground, which had endured such a bombardment previously without being harmed, now began to crack. Even this powerful platform was unable to bear such a fierce attack. Everyone finally understood why sword cultivators were praised as number one in terms of offense. Perhaps only sword cultivators could instantly release a power several times greater than their own like this. Was Long Chen's corpse destroyed? When the dust faded, people couldn't see any sign of Long Chen. But there was no blood on the ground. Where is he? Even Shui Guanji and the others were startled. Long Chen had actually disappeared. Are you looking for me? A voice rang out from the sky. Everyone hastily raised their heads. Their expressions involuntarily changed. Long Chen was floating in the sky. A pair of huge wings had appeared on his back. Those wings had been formed from endless lightning runes. The berserk aura they released made it seem like they wanted to destroy the world. Lightning wings on his back, and a lightning spear in his hand. Up in the air, overlooking them all, he seemed just like an arrogant lightning god. Everyone felt themselves to be so minuscule in front of the destructive will coming from his thunder force. The current Long Chen seemed like the ruler of the world. Whoever he wanted to exterminate would be immediately exterminated without being able to resist. He was actually able to condense lightning wings. That would require incredibly vast thunder force. No wonder even I almost lost sight of him, muttered the vice sect master to himself. When those swords had been about to reach Long Chen, he had suddenly summoned these lightning wings. These were lightning wings he had condensed based on the flame cloud wings principles. Long Chen had found that these lightning wings were much faster than the flame cloud wings. They were able to break through spatial resistance, and so they were more suitable for combat. His speed had been so fast that many people had thought they had seen him devoured by the swords. But that had just been an afterimage. Suddenly, he shot toward Zhongwen. People could only see a brilliant ray of light. They were unable to see Long Chen's figure. Zhong Muyan had not expected Long Chen to possess such a powerful trump card. He was even faster than her. Boom! Zhong Muyan's palm blocked the tip of his spear. Long Chen was knocked back, while Zhong Muyan didn't even move. Although you might be faster than me, I can suppress you in terms of power with my ancestral blood support. Today, you'll definitely lose. Zhong Muyan took the initiative to attack Long Chen. A rune lit up on her palm, giving her attack immense strength. At the same time, Zhao Wuji also attacked. Covered in his earthen armor, he smashed his fist toward Long Chen. Yu Qianshan also moved. His sword pointed toward the sky, and a ray of sword chi sword. Everyone felt a chill. The three of them all attacked at the same time. Shui Guanji, who had only just recovered from his injury, was filled with rancor. Clenching his teeth, a blood-red mark lit up on his forehead. The water energy around him formed into one supreme water dragon that charged toward Long Chen. The four of them had attacked together. Furthermore, Shui Guanji's water dragon also possessed a water elemental force field. No matter how Long Chen tried to dodge, he would be stuck in his force field, which would cause his movements to slow. He couldn't possibly dodge their attacks. His hatred of Long Chen had already reached a peak. This hatred also contained envy, as he was unable to accept that Long Chen was this powerful. He was unable to accept that a bumpkin without any backing could be even stronger than him, someone whose family had gone all out to groom into the greatest genius. He wanted to kill Long Chen. Even if he couldn't obtain the final treasure, he wanted to kill him. So he no longer held back and released his strongest attack. The monastery heads all stood up with grave expressions. Perhaps the Xiantiandao sect was about to lose a genius. His retreat path had been blocked, and the 4 heavenly geniuses' attacks were about to reach him. Long Chen suddenly smiled, battle intent soaring out of him. When had he ever been afraid of someone in the same realm? 4-star battle armor. Four stars appeared in Long Chen's eyes. Although one of them was faint, it was definitely there. Long Chen's aura erupted like a volcano. Endless pressure spread. A pillar of qi soared out of him and into the sky. Long Chen felt that the energy inside him was boiling. If he didn't release it, his own body would explode. In the face of their 4 attacks, he slammed his lightning spear forward. Boom! The land trembled. The collision released a blinding light, and it was as if the very space they were in was about to be torn asunder. The blinding light was actually heavenly Dao runes. They shattered in the air, turning into multicolored dust and light before disappearing. 5 figures flew out of the dust. Even when the 4 of them were going all out, they still didn't have an advantage. All 5 of them were blown back into the distance, and Shui Guanji even vomited blood. Everyone was deathly silent for a moment, all their shocked gazes locked onto Long Chen. They had never seen such a monstrous person before. When the 4 heavenly geniuses joined hands, then even the monastery heads would be instantly killed if they didn't have enchanted items to protect themselves. But Long Chen had managed to fight evenly against them. That was even more shocking than when he had previously suppressed them, because he had only done that through his battle experience and technique, making it so that they couldn't release their power. But this time, there had been no technique to speak of. It had been entirely a competition of brute strength. Although they felt this result to be unbelievable, the reality was before them. Long Chen's power was enough to contend against the 4 of them. In other words, if they continued like this, then with his profound combat experience, the 4 of them wouldn't have a chance of winning. Who would have believed such a result? But after seeing this, who wouldn't? Other than the Dragonblood warriors, everyone was completely shocked. As for the Dragonblood warriors, their blood was boiling with battle intent. They had an urge to immediately charge over and fight as well. Each time they saw Long Chen fight, they couldn't stop their blood from boiling. Each of them watched him worshipfully. This godlike person had given them the ability to fight for the peak of the martial path and to stand on the same level as other geniuses. If it weren't for Long Chen, they would be nameless nobodies in the 108th monastery. If it weren't for Long Chen, they would most likely be ordinary bone-forging disciples. If it weren't for Long Chen, then they would never be able to participate in the Xiantiandao sect's trials. They had a thirst to always follow Long Chen and fight alongside him. Even if they had to spill their blood, even if they had to die, they could die with smiles on their faces. Of everyone present, only the Vice Sect Master was expressionless. He had thought of a legendary existence, but he wasn't sure. Long Chen raised his spear at the 4 shocked people. Since you've given me a gift, it's only right for me to reciprocate. Take care. Suddenly, space trembled. Long Chen's spear became a blade which he pointed toward the sky. Split the heavens. A huge lightning blade slashed down on the 4 of them. This blade seemed like it could cut apart the clouds, break apart the stars, and destroy anyone who was struck by it. The 4 of them were horrified. They were all locked down by his power. If they tried to run, it would just draw the attack to them first. Block together. Profound water 1,000-layer shield. Shouted Shui Guanji. He hastily formed hand seals and summoned an immense water shield. Runes superimposed in hundreds of layers. This was Shui Guanji's strongest defense. It combined hundreds of water shields. Previously, he had been too careless and hadn't used it. That was because he was also worried about handling the others after killing Long Chen. After all, with his water element techniques, he still had a high chance of obtaining the treasure. But now Long Chen had displayed power that had far exceeded his expectations. Let alone fighting for the treasure, they might not even be able to keep their lives. He had no choice but to use his strongest technique. Although this was just the first form of Split the Heavens, both techniques looked the same physically. Furthermore, Long Chen's aura was terrifyingly powerful. They all smelled the scent of death from this move. If they were on their own, they would definitely die. Great earthen wall. Zhao Wuji slammed his hands on the ground, summoning a huge wall dozens of meters thick. Its hardness surpassed steel. The two of them had only just set up these defenses when Long Chen's lightning blade fell. Shui Guanji's water shield had the ability to slowly reduce an attack's power. It released countless ripples to exhaust any attack. But his shield was torn apart easily. The lightning blade landed on the earthen wall. Boom. Zhao Wuji's expression completely changed. His wall shattered and Long Chen's attack still possessed enough energy to kill him. Flying Star Slash. Yu Qianshan struck. As a sword cultivator, the only techniques he knew were offensive ones. He used an attack to break Long Chen's attack. His sword chi slashed onto Long Chen's lightning blade. But his sword chi instantly exploded upon colliding. Great Ancestor, hear your descendants' call. Bestow me with your bloodline power. Awaken, ancestral spirit blessing. Just as Long Chen's blade was about to reach them, a large hand protected the four of them. Boom. Long Chen's terrifying blade actually shattered upon striking the hand. Heavens, what is that? Startled cries rang out from the disciples. A huge figure had appeared behind Zhongwen. This figure was 300 meters tall, and its body was translucent. It was what had protected them. Zhong Wuyen's face was as pale as paper. A blood crystal had appeared on her forehead, and light shone from it. This child Wen, how could she be so foolish? The Wang family head was both startled and infuriated. This should be a secret art to overdraft her bloodline power, correct? Asked the vice sect master. Yes. This technique is extremely harmful to her body, and she can't maintain it for long. It's one of her life-protecting techniques, and she absolutely can't use it unless her life is in danger. This child, when did she become such a fool? The Wang family head sighed. This child had definitely been spoiled rotten. She didn't even think about the consequences of her actions. You don't need to be angry. If they always considered every single thing before acting, they wouldn't be youngsters. They need to mature in desperate straits, or no matter how good their talent is, they won't be able to grow. Committing mistakes isn't bad. It's a must for growth. The real thing to avoid is to have a peerless genius that doesn't dare to make any mistakes. Then their talent would just be wasted, said the vice sect master. The other three family heads didn't say anything, but inside, they sighed with relief at his words. Although their act could trick others, it couldn't trick the vice sect master. He merely smiled a bit. That smile was a bit ridiculing. Long Chen stared closely at that figure behind Zhongwen. He was extremely shocked. How was this technique so terrifying? Zhong Wuyen icily said, "This is the activation of my bloodline. Although my ancestor has already passed away, through my spiritual strength and my bloodline power, it has come to protect its descendants. With my ancestral spirit here, you should know the difference between us." Long Chen shook his head. "I really can't understand you children. Is relying on your ancestors' power really so worthy of pride? They've already died so long ago, but they still have to worry about you like this. You can't even let their soul rest in peace. If you weren't even able to defeat me in this kind of situation, would you go back to your family's ancestral tomb, dig up your ancestors, and then beg them to go fight for you?" Long Chen didn't have the slightest good opinion of Zhongwen. Although she might not look bad, she had some screws loose in her head. "Fuck off," raged Zhongwen. The huge figure behind her moved. It pointed its palms toward Long Chen, and a scarlet light shone from it. That light enveloped all the space around Long Chen. Furthermore, it came so quickly that it instantly enveloped him as soon as it moved. Long Chen felt an immense threat from that light. He slashed his lightning blade at it with his full strength. Boom! The light exploded along with his lightning blade. Long Chen was blown back dozens of meters away. What a terrifying attack! Long Chen was shocked. That attack had been similar to a spiritual attack. His thunder force was the bane of spiritual strength, but his lightning spear had still been destroyed. His thunder force restricts my ancestral spirit. Are you guys just going to watch? Zhong Huiyan suddenly turned to look at Shui Guanji and the others. Their expressions changed slightly. They knew that continuing to conceal their power was impossible. Since we can't keep concealing our power, let's join hands. We'll kill Long Chen in one attack. Shui Guanji suddenly smiled sinisterly. He bit one of his fingers and wiped the blood against his forehead. A blood-red mark covered his entire face. Boom! Shui Guanji's water runes seemed to come alive, and they released a torrential battle intent. A 300-meter water dragon slowly condensed and let out a furious roar. It was as if it was a true dragon. The dragon was comprised of water runes, but now 2 red eyes appeared on it that made it look extremely sinister. Most terrifying of all, when he summoned this water dragon, Shui Guanji's originally handsome face withered, making him appear like a zombie. Everyone was shocked, and the most uneasy one was Shui Yunsong. Only he knew that Shui Guanji had increased the power of his water dragon through his life energy. He was using up his essence blood in exchange for 10 times the power. This was an incredibly vicious technique that would shorten his lifespan. Now that things had progressed to this point, it was no longer an ordinary competition, but a battle to the death. This Long Chen really is abominable. If he wasn't here, things would have never progressed to this point. Since he had already died outside, he should never have returned. Shui Yunsong was clenching his teeth. In his fury, he ended up accidentally saying what he was thinking. The Vice Sect Master's expression sank. His gaze was like a blade stabbing into Shui Yunsong. A formless killing intent crashed down on him. Shui Yunsong suddenly felt all his energy being stripped from his body. He no longer felt any connection to his spiritual yuan. It was like he was an ordinary mortal, and he instantly fell on the ground. Even the monastery heads around Shui Yunsong were affected. They felt their souls almost flee from their bodies. The Grim Reaper's sickle was pressed right up against their throats. Do you want to say that again? The Vice Sect Master looked icily at Shui Yunsong. Vice Sect Master, please spare me. Disciple let his mouth go out of control. Shui Yunsong was absolutely terrified. He knew the Vice Sect Master was truly angered. If he said something wrong again, there really was a real danger of him losing his life. The Vice Sect Master icily said, as the head of your family as well as the leader of 9 super monasteries, don't you feel ashamed about being so biased and envious? Were all your years wasted? Don't you like to pose as a brilliant sage with far-reaching foresight? If you have that much ability, why don't you use it against the corrupt path? All you know how to do is poison your own people. Why do you want to kill your own disciple just because he is talented? When did your heart become so twisted? The Vice Sect Master's gaze was as sharp as a blade. It looked like he had an urge to immediately kill Shui Yunsong. Shui Yunsong's sweat instantly drenched his robes. When this is over, go into seclusion and reflect upon yourself. Shui Yunsong's expression changed. This was clearly telling him to give up his position as the family head. But he didn't dare to argue. Who asked him to be so loose-lipped? He had actually said things he should have kept to himself. Yes, many thanks for Vice Sect Master's wisdom, said Shui Yunsong. Then congratulations, brother Yunsong. In the future, you'll be able to live a carefree life of freedom. I truly envy you. Zhou Tianyi was the first to offer his congratulations. Shui Yunsong almost died of rage. But he didn't even have an urge to say anything back. He was incomparably furious, but he didn't dare to release his fury on the Vice Sect Master. All of this hatred would have to be placed on Long Chen. Originally, things had been going well. But as soon as Long Chen had appeared, everything had changed. He had even lost his position as the family head. Although he had already been planning on abdicating his position, there was a large difference between voluntarily and involuntarily giving up his position. Shui Yunsong didn't just hate Long Chen, he also hated Shui Wuhan. The only one he didn't hate was himself. Ah, good. Then everyone can go all out. Great earthen spirit. Seeing Zhong Wuyan and Shui Guanji release their greatest power, Zhao Wuji laughed and squatted down. Blood-red runes lit up on his hands, and he slammed them onto the ground. The ground shook as endless runes surged. A mound slowly rose out of the ground. It continued to rise until it was 300 meters high. A head suddenly appeared on that mound, then limbs and a torso. In the end, it became a huge earthen giant. That earth giant was covered in shining earth runes. All the earth's energy was drawn into it. The solid platform even broke around it. Since you've all brought out your trump cards, I won't be so shameless as to hold back. Yu Qianshan's expression was cold. He focused on his sword. Suddenly, the heavenly Tao runes behind him disappeared. His sword began to shine like the sun. A ray of sword chi sword, one that made people's hair stand on end. How did he manage to merge the heavenly Taos with the sword Tao? No one had ever heard of such a technique. This was definitely something Yu Qianshan had developed himself. Apologies, Long Chen. This is my heavenly sword art. You should feel honored to be the first person to die to this technique. Yu Qianshan pointed his sword at Long Chen. The light from it was blinding, making it so people couldn't even see his figure anymore. Long Chen hadn't expected the four of them to still possess such terrifying trump cards. He was truly shocked. But now he was a bit irritated that the four of them were looking at him as if he were already dead. I've had enough of your little show-off act. I'll bring out my true power as well. Long Chen sneered and put away his lightning blade. A black saber appeared in his hand. This was a middle-grade enchanted item that had come from a corrupt expert. A fiendish aura came from it. Although he found it dislikable, it was both heavy and long enough. After all, spirit weapons were not as easy to use as true weapons. In front of the four heavenly geniuses' strongest trump cards, he had no choice but to use his full strength. He was slightly nervous, but he was also a bit excited. A boiling battle intent surged within him. Kill him. The four of them had the same thought. Yu Qianshan was the first to move. His blinding sword stabbed toward Long Chen. Long Chen's heart trembled. He finally had to admit that Yu Qianshan was truly terrifying. He had condensed his heavenly Tao runes into his sword, and his sword chi had merged with his sword intent. His power was limitless. He didn't take it head-on. The lightning wings behind him flapped, and he rapidly retreated. The lightning wings pushed his speed to the peak, making it so others couldn't lock onto him. Boom. That sword chi ended up slashing onto the ground. Heavens, the platform was cut apart. Shocked cries rang out. Up until now, the intense battle hadn't caused much damage to the platform. But now, a huge ditch was cut into it. It could be seen just how terrifying this sword chi was. But the ditch had only just appeared when it rapidly fused back together. The runes on the platform had completely healed the damage. Long Chen had only just dodged Yu Qianshan's attack when a roaring water dragon came at him. It was too big, and Long Chen couldn't dodge it. He slashed his saber at it. Boom. The water dragon was forced back, but it didn't explode. That shocked Long Chen. It was truly worthy of being an ultimate trump card. Its power was at least 10 times greater than before. Red light split the void. Long Chen had only just forced back the water dragon and had yet to stabilize. There was no way he could dodge this red light. Lightning finger. This attack had come from Zhongwen. The red light was not just a physical attack, but a terrifying spiritual attack. An ordinary block would be ineffective. A bolt of lightning crashed into the red light, releasing blinding light. Their attacks ended up canceling each other out. What? Long Chen had only just blocked the red light when a huge fist appeared behind him. This huge fist, which was even bigger than a whole house, ruthlessly smashed into him. Such a powerful attack had come without any sound or warning. By the time Long Chen noticed it, he couldn't dodge. He could only circulate his spiritual yuan and use his back to receive it. Boom. He smashed into the ground like a shooting star. Intense pain radiated from his back, and he felt like his bones were about to break. He couldn't help being startled. If he hadn't summoned the 4-star battle armor, such a terrifying attack would have at least heavily injured him. Heavens! They really are all monsters. How can he act so nonchalant after receiving such a terrifying attack? Is he really a human like us? The disciples felt like they were going crazy. The 5 of them possessed inconceivable power, which had already surpassed their imaginations. Let alone them, even the rank 1 celestials were pale. They had done their best in cultivating, and although they knew they wouldn't be able to defeat a rank 2 celestial, they had thought that they would at least possess some ability to fight them. At the very least, they should have been able to endure 100 exchanges. But as this battle grew more intense, the number of exchanges they estimated they could handle dropped. It went from 100 to 10 to 3 to 1. Now they had completely given up on even that. They found that let alone exchanging blows, just the aftershocks from this battle could kill them. They were not even on the same level. Just how did Long Chen train his physical body? The monastery heads were all shocked. This kind of physical body was something they had never even heard of, let alone seen. Even Zhao Wuji, who claimed to possess a monstrous physical body, the one said to possess the greatest strength in the Shintian Dao sect, couldn't compare to Long Chen. Long Chen stood up. He saw Shui Guanji smiling sinisterly. He immediately realized that the reason he hadn't noticed Zhao Wuji's attack was because of Shui Guanji. He had used his water runes to isolate his perception. Seeing that he hadn't killed Long Chen, Zhao Wuji shot forward. Following him, the earth giant charged. At the same time, the other 3 also attacked. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.